I'll start the meeting. Okay. We recognize that the Hogan Administrative Center occupies the land of the Ho-Chunk people. Please take a moment to celebrate and honor this ancestral Ho-Chunk land and the sacred lands of all Indigenous peoples. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Baumann,
Here.
Ms. Berkedal,
Here.
Dr. Garcia,
Here.
Mr. Jackson,
Here.
Dr. Jimenez,
Here.
Mr. Newmeister,
Here.
Mr. Korberg,
Here.
Dr. Sprague,
Here.
Ms. Sukla.
Here.
A quorum of the Board of Education is present, so the regularly scheduled meeting of January 8th, 2024 is called to order. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Making a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Second.
So tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board with a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Jimenez. We will approve the agenda as submitted unless there is a motion to amend. Hearing none.
And Ms. Baumann, because we have virtual participants, we will need to do
Roll call.
votes for
Okay.
each vote.
So we'll do a roll call vote on this one.
Ms. Berkedal,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
Aye.
Mr. Jackson,
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez,
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister,
Aye.
Mr. Korberg,
Aye.
Dr. Sprague,
Aye.
Ms. Sukla,
Aye.
Ms. Baumann.
Aye. All right, so our agenda looks different from other nights because we have the strategic planning to look at, and we wanted to put that earlier in the evening. So we're going to move into communication from our student representatives.
Hello. So I'm the student representative with Logan, and we are coming close to the end of the first semester. It's the 19th of January, and the second semester will begin on the 23rd, along with registration for classes and such. Before then, finals are going on for the next 2 weeks. They are a little different this year, of course, with standards-based grading, less tests and more project-based to really demonstrate those standards learned. As well, for incoming freshmen for the next year, we will hold our curriculum fair on the 22nd, right before the beginning of the second semester. This sort of just introduces new freshmen to what classes are like and all that. As well, for seniors, the Logan Scholarship deadline is this Friday, so it's coming up, and it's becoming more evident that getting close to the end for seniors. Lots of decisions, quite stressful, but on to some fun stuff now. Amelia Adams, a women wrestler, has won her weight class at Bi-State, and she was selected as the Wisconsin High School Athlete of the Week last Friday.
Cool. That's great.
Very impressive. And as well, tomorrow we have a boys basketball game versus West Salem and a girls basketball game against Platteville.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll move on to our school showcase. Tonight we're showcasing our Habitat for Humanity Youth Apprenticeship, and we have Callie Ahrens from Central High School here to present.
Greetings, Board. My name is Matt Wiggy, and I get to work with Callie and actually Mason over here as a Youth Apprentice Coordinator for the school district. I work with I work with Britta Rotary. So we work with students being placed out in the apprenticeship placements around town. So tonight, as a way of showcasing what Callie's doing and by way of segue into the award that you're going to be sharing, we're going to do a little question and answer. So first of all, Callie, for those people who are here tonight and might not be familiar, what is Habitat for Humanity first?
So Habitat for Humanity is a global nonprofit housing organization that works in local communities in all 50 states and in more than 70 countries with a united vision of giving everyone a decent place to live.
So how in the world did you get a youth apprenticeship with an organization like Habitat for Humanity?
Yeah, so my mom got me in contact with Dr. Berta Rotering, and from there we used my interests and what I want to do with my future to find the best fit place, and Habitat happened to be that place.
That sounds great. So what do you do with Habitat for Humanity as part of your position? What does that look like?
So my YA is under marketing, and my official title is Community Outreach Apprentice. So I do a lot of poster creating, presentation slides, different work for like events within the job.
That's great. So I know because I speak with all of our youth apprentices, I see that many of them have some unique experiences. And I've seen some top secret places at Quick Trip, which is pretty cool. But you have also been privy to be a part of some very cool opportunities with Habitat. What sorts of experiences are going to be those standouts for you?
So this summer I had the opportunity to travel to Oshkosh with a few of my coworkers. And I went to a Home for Everyone conference, and it was super interesting to just learn about different housing issues across the state that can then be applied to our own community and like ways to fix housing issues here. I've also had the opportunity to speak with local and like state legislation about housing issues.
It's a pretty phenomenal experience as a high school senior, which kind of brings us to the close. So you're a high school senior, you can't do this forever, or maybe you can, I don't know. But what's next for you after you complete your youth apprenticeship then, and Habitat for Humanity and your year one apprenticeship is completed? What's next?
My goal has always been to do something with social justice, and Habitat has really helped like pave the way and solidified that like this is what I want to do with my future. So I'm just really grateful for this opportunity.
That's pretty awesome, and it's pretty cool to see that we get to honor Habitat for Humanity a little bit here tonight too, and I thought it would be really nice to, as a wonderful way just to showcase how things are often mutually beneficial when things are good. So thanks, Callie.
Thank you so much. All right, so nice little lead into the business community partnership that we will recognize tonight. So the Board of Education has nominated Habitat for Humanity for the Wisconsin Association of School Boards Business Honor Roll. Habitat for Humanity has partnered with the School District of La Crosse to provide leadership, instruction, and a vital connection to the advocacy and construction industry in our school district. Habitat for Humanity team members have also donated time to assist in high school technology education programming, have presented to students, and have committed to partnering with the School District of La Crosse in continued opportunities to support academic and curricular experiences. Will representatives from Habitat for Humanity meet me at the podium?
Should we all?
Photobomb.
Yeah.
Photobomb.
I'm definitely in that.
So, hello, everybody. There's questions first, or do you want me to say a few words?
Good choice.
Okay, I'll just say a few words because I'm really excited about this award. So my name is Kaya Fox. I'm the Executive Director at Habitat for Humanity of the Greater La Crosse region, and I cannot express what a huge honor it is to be recognized for our work with the La Crosse School District. Statistics repeatedly show over and over again the link between academic success of our students and access to safe and affordable housing. Over and over again, we see that the health attainments, educational attainments, and future success of our youth is predicated on kids going home at the end of the day to housing that is safe, housing that is consistent, housing that is stable for them and their families. So we are truly honored to bring together kind of those two worlds of academic achievement and access to safe, affordable housing in the work that we do at Habitat for Humanity. So we are honored to receive this award and the ability to play just a small role in that future success of the youth in our community. We know what great work our educators do for our students that bring students like Callie to our organization to help us expand and do the work that we do at Habitat for Humanity. And so as we continue our partnership with the School District of La Crosse in future youth apprentice endeavors in our construction and in our offices, teaching our youth the excitement of building homes as well as doing work for local nonprofits within your community, as well as the work that we're going to be doing in partnership with Logan Middle School as part of our Renew the Block project. We want to extend our deepest thanks to the School District of La Crosse as we continue to create future leaders in our communities, future leaders such as Callie, future volunteers, community advocates, and voices in our communities for those less fortunate. So thank you so much for this recognition. It's a huge honor.
Thank you. Yeah.
How are businesses nominated by this board? How does that process work?
This year, we worked with Dr. Britta Rodering, who does most of our community outreach with businesses, and that was how we identified them this year, but happy to have more active involvement at the board level as we move forward.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment, and I just wanted to thank Kaya for being such an incredible leader in our community and advocate for people and teacher to bring the next generation of nonprofit leaders to our community. It's not just a little bit of low-cost labor. Like, it takes a lot of work to bring on an apprentice or an intern, and thank you so much for doing that and for partnering with our school district and helping shepherd in our next nonprofit leaders. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Katie.
Yeah.
Well said. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time and your honor. Take care.
Okay, so we'll move into the strategic planning section of our agenda. And there are some items at the board table in front of each of you, which are printed out versions of what we have embedded in board docs. But I will turn it over to Dr. Engel to.
All right, so I am going to present and we'll see if it's working up for everyone else as well. So we've got a presentation that goes through the board work plan that we identified this last meeting and covers the strategic plan, course of action development, and some courses of action. And we'll move through that in a deliberate manner with time for questions and comments and deliberation, but with an intent to get through it all so that we can set the stage for what comes next and future board work. With that, these documents are all up on board docs, including this presentation for folks that want to find them. There's numbers at the bottom of slides if we need help with referencing things. And then for the board table, I've printed off physical documents as well, if that's helpful also. And so our strategic planning, I'll kick us off. So our work plan for tonight is to review the context for the situation, establish board goals if necessary, and review administration's long-range facility plan, consider facility options, and then identify requests for information. And just as a preview for what we kind of tentatively laid out for our next meeting on January 22nd, we would discuss options, eliminate options that are deemed unacceptable, analyze those that remain, and identify further requests for information. So just kind of a lay of the land as we move forward. All right, the context for the situation, and this comes from the first part of the long-range facility plan with a couple extra graphs and pictures for the benefit of those here. So enrollment, since 1995, enrollment in the school district's fallen by 29%. And the primary cause of this declining enrollment's been lower birth rates. Since 1990, we've also had a 30% reduction in birth rates. And so it's natural that with a stable population in our school district, we would have fewer students that attend. Since 2015, elementary enrollment has declined by 701 students, or 20%. There was a little bit of lag relative to other types of decline, but it has caught up with us in the school district of La Crosse. And projections show enrollment predicted to decline for at least the next 5 to 10 years, with a predicted loss of 746 students by 2028. School districts are funded on a per pupil basis, and so this impacts our financial projections pretty significantly. Since 2019, the school district of La Crosse has lost $5.7 million in revenue limit authority due to declining enrollment. And revenue limit reductions are anticipated to grow from 1.2 million to 2 million by 2028. So with anticipated declining enrollment, this will be a continued challenge that the school district faces and will continue to have an impact on the district's revenue limit. Graph there shows annual budget deficits in blue and the cumulative impact on fund balance over time if unaddressed.
Dr. Engel, there's
Yes.
no dates on that graph. Do you know what the starting date and the ending date are there? Just for
My apologies. 2024 and 2028. Okay.
Thank you.
Building inventory and condition. The average age of original construction is 1961 in our school district. And a different way to look at it, because there's been additions to things, is to look at the average age of the square footage in our school district. And that average age is 50 years old. And for context, that would put us at around 1972, 1973. That is before special education and disability law came into place. And so with the average age being before that, it calls into question, some of our needs as we move forward in kind of a new era. The district has identified $23 million of maintenance over the next 5 years that ought to be accomplished to keep our buildings in good condition, with an additional $95 million in maintenance and capital projects anticipated over the following 15 to 20 years. For some context, that $95 million does include projects to make our 2 high schools comparable and our middle schools comparable, things like swimming pools or auditoriums, which are a little bit bigger, but there is a large amount of maintenance nonetheless. Best practice for elementary size. As we look at research and our own experiences in elementary schools, the ideal elementary size is a small to mid-sized school of about 350 to 400 students. This allows us to retain small class sizes, efficiently allows for about 18 to 20 sections with 3 to 4 sections per grade level, which allows for full-time specialist teachers and staff to efficiently deliver instruction and services to students. And as another consideration, something that's been a common consideration in the school district of La Crosse for 30-some years is socioeconomic balance, which helps provide similar experience for families no matter where they attend elementary school. Mm-hmm.
A quick question, when you talk about full-time specialist teachers, are we just talking art, music, PE, or are we talking other specialists as well?
Art, music, PE, library, special education, some of the kind of unique special education services might still need to be shared, but often we're able to support full-time English learner, teachers, and others. And so there's a wide range of specialists that impacts.
I appreciate it. I just want to make sure we're all tracking with the same language, because typically specialist just has meant art, music, PE, but I want to make sure that it's all-encompassing.
Absolutely. There was a facility advisory committee that met in 2023 between April and November. They spent a significant amount of time analyzing our school district's challenges and potential solutions as it relates to facilities. And at the end of their thoughtful, deliberate work, they identified some recommendations for administration and the school board to consider as we grapple with facilities. And those recommendations were to close 2 elementary schools to maximize the instructional benefit to students, to pair a north and south elementary school closure to address declining enrollment across the district and keep students together from elementary through high school, to close Northwoods International Elementary Building, to close the Hinchin Elementary School Building, to adjust elementary school boundaries in accordance with the recommendations of the administration, and to retain the International Baccalaureate program at another site. There are some policies that guide this long-range facility plan, as well as our courses of action as we move forward. School board policy, operational expectation 12, facilities, states that we should ensure that physical facilities support the accomplishment of the board's results policies. OE5, financial planning, states that we must develop and present to the board a multi-year financial plan that is related directly to the board's results priorities and operational expectations goals, and that avoids long-term fiscal jeopardy to the district. OE7, asset protection, and OE11, the instructional program, provides some additional guidance. And our board mission also states that we must ensure resources are available to provide excellence in education. We have a couple of administrative policies that further define some of our criteria as we think about long-range facilities planning. 9100 facilities development indicates what will be considered in construction, renovation, and maintenance of buildings. And 9800 retirement of facilities outlines the considerations that must be taken into account when closing a building. That is kind of a quick once-over of the situation. I know that's a short period of time to cover all that's gone into this, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of supporting documentation on our Facility Advisory Committee's website, but happy to stop there, take any questions about the situation, and leave a moment to move on to our second item. Mr. Jackson?
So I'm looking through slide 5, which the graph looks similar to what was presented to us in early December, 04. Based on the budget projections you gave us at that point, that's where you're going through being your negative 3.5, negative 5.9. So I know when we talked about that at the time, we asked if the cost side has been adjusted. So your wages and everything has been adjusted to near the reduction in student count. And the time said that you hadn't done that on the cost side, you made the revenue side changes to project our declining enrollment, but we hadn't changed the expense side. The numbers are the same, so I wanted to make sure that we're basing kind of the foundation of these discussions on true numbers. So I thought we were going to see different numbers because at the time said that we hadn't adjusted the expense side.
Yeah, so it wasn't included in these financial projections here. However, when we put together our courses of action, one of the assumptions is that we will reduce our budget by at least $250,000 annually in order to adjust to declining enrollment. We've been on a pathway of becoming more efficient for the last 4 years and have reduced, if you don't account for ESSER and referendum funds, I think close to 40 positions in the last 4 years. We're at a level of efficiency that would require impacts to programs and opportunities for students at this point. And so we anticipate that we would be able to reduce about $250,000 annually without a material disruption to schools. But thereafter, we'd be seeking operational efficiencies without or jeopardize impacting opportunities for kids and support. And so that's part of the baked-in assumption as we move forward over the course of 4 years or 5. It would be $1 to $1.25 million in reductions outside of facilities reductions or other things.
I just did a quick run through, even the 23-24 budget book that we provided, based on, and as well as the 12-4 projections, I look at 24, 25, and I add up the 4 big buckets you guys broke out, the wage increases, health insurance increase, utility increase, and then the remaining just net expense increase, just the assumptions we made there, about $5.4 million delta between 23 and 24. But I add up those 4 buckets, that's about $4.1 million delta. Just those 4 buckets, which is what we're projecting your expense side to increase. So right now, I've got a $1.3 million unaccounted for delta in the numbers you're using as your assumptions to where we are increasing from 23 to 24. So I can send you this at some point, if I'm out there on the weekend, I can't show it to you. It's my quick answer, I can do it. But again, I wanted to make sure that all of these discussions are based on the fact that we're assuming we're going to make these budget deficits, we will. I just want to make sure that we're working on 2 numbers. That's really the item where we're going to be.
I think I'd be happy to take some time to clarify that further with you when we can talk about it directly.
So Jeff, are you referring to the December 4th?
Yes.
Where we have the front side of the sheet kind of goes through more, and then on the flip side, it breaks the revenues and expenses.
Correct, I'm using that breakdown on the expense side, and there's those 4 big buckets, the wage net expenses, the health insurance net expense increase, and all the percentage-wise projections that they're looking for, that we're making all these assumptions on. And I'm just using it, I'm just based on the budget books, total expenses that we have, showing that, and it's not lining up. So, again, I wanted to make sure that we would still be projecting a budget shortfall, but it would not be as much as we're currently using our numbers. So, like I said, we can talk about it in more detail. Again, I think before I get in more comfortable as we get through these presentations, I want to make sure we're really tight on revenue and expenses.
Excellent. I think I know what you're looking for. Any other questions, clarifications as it relates to the situation itself? Next item on the work plan was an opportunity to consider establishing board goals. There's lots of information to come. Those may become self-evident as we move forward, and maybe as a moving target regardless. And so, I don't know if you want to spend any time here.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we need to choose a path forward, right? That's kind of the biggest goal. How we handle the meetings going ahead. To be honest, I wanted to get board member feedback on what we're seeing, and that would help me figure out how best to approach the next couple meetings. If there are other goals that board members want to establish in the process, aside from what I've shared.
I guess at this point, I don't have anything different. I feel that what needs to happen is we need to ensure that we are living within a school district that lives within its means, that is providing the maximal amount of funding for education for our students within our community. It's going to be a challenging process to get to that solution. So my hope is that part of our goals is also how we have that conversation, that we have an opportunity to be as open as possible with ideas. I had somebody come up to me and say, well, I saw the Facility Advisory Committee recommendation, so that means all the other schools are safe. Is that correct? Right. So I think that that is something that we have to recognize, is that for some people who are not following this topic every day, they may be, in their view, blindsided by some of the conversations or some of the positions that we may raise in this conversation. So I think we just need to be respectful, we need to be transparent, and we need to bring the conversation to this table.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I mean, I would hope that board members, if there's a sticking point with information we've received, that it's aired at the board table and not a gripe that kind of silently is carried until the time we have to vote. My ideal scenario is board members have all the information they need, feel well, prepared to make the decisions and the votes that they need to make. But I agree. I think that having the discussions at the board table is important for transparency. I think speaking with the community with empathy and recognizing that, like, the district's budget problems are not solely necessarily these 4 schools that were identified through the FAC process. We're a complete district, and what we're trying to do is maintain the services and the programs that our community relies on and, that our students deserve.
I think a goal moving forward with it, given the work plan that we've agreed to for addressing this, and I see we have some news coverage tonight, but making sure that we have a plan to report out on what was discussed at each meeting and connect people to the links to our board materials, and we probably have it.
Our intent is to put out a press release after every board meeting that summarizes what was covered and links to resources. So essentially the work plan without a lot of editorialization, and direct people to our website, the meeting itself, the recording, etc.
Ways to engage. Okay.
Great. I think we want to make sure that communication is the board's communication and not just the administration's communication. I think while we work together very closely, I think for the public's purpose, we want to clarify what the board's message is. It's from the board.
Sure.
Did Jeff have something he wanted to say?
He says no. I mean, I want to add also, for talking about communicating with the media. So in our board policies, the president is responsible for communicating on behalf of the board, but individual board members, as long as they are being mindful of how they are communicating with the media, just cannot speak for the board. So there may be questions about things that you're supporting. Keep that in mind as you receive those.
And that's as
requests.
simple as just stating, these are my views alone, and not me representing the board.
Yep.
President Bauman, do you have any planned media appearances, like on the calendar already?
I just did one before the meeting, and as requests come out, I'll fit them in. Since it's a brand new year, I have a bunch of personal time loaded back in my bank, so.
Jeff raises his hand.
Jeff, you got a question?
So I'm used to raising my hand for a meeting. Two things. One, I want to make sure that we keep in context that we make sure we're being empathetic, but we are trying to keep in mind that a lot of the schools are in discussion right now, so from our vulnerable populations, they typically don't have a very strong voice because they are using a lot of so I want to make sure that we work our way and understand and remember that as we go through this process. We have to be very impactful in the way we do it. And the second, an idea as we kind of build our structure and how we want to approach this is we look at the boundaries for each one of these schools and maybe how to approach it and want to help us understand the least impact that we can have on families. and balance out our schools and understand which ones will be closer and how this all works. I think that could help us kind of drive the conversation after this presentation. So but both those things I think we have to be mindful of.
Anything else board members want to share before we move on? Okay.
All right, so I will dive into the meat and potatoes of our long-range facility plan 2050. This plan is intended to be enduring. Certainly the focus of the board's work in the short term is what to do about facilities over the next few years, but our hope is that this is a more comprehensive plan and stands the test of time with modification over that period. So, the long-range facilities mission is essentially OE12. The School District of La Crosse provides physical facilities to support the accomplishment of the board's results policies. The vision it reflects one that the school district has adopted for a long time. The School District of La Crosse is the school district of choice. And not only do we provide excellent choices within the school district, such as the School of Technology and Arts and Cooley Montessori, but we also want our community to choose La Crosse and the surrounding area to choose La Crosse. The long-range facility plan intent. The purpose of this long-range facility plan is to ensure student access to modern facilities that support a comprehensive education, to efficiently use educational spaces to maximize staff support to students, to aid in efficient use of district resources, and to create a favorable impression of the school district. The key tasks in this long-range facility plan are: 1, reduce the number of elementary buildings; 2, replace, renovate, or repurpose aging elementary facilities; 3, invest in public-facing facilities; 4, invest in underdeveloped career and technical education facilities; and 5, adapt to future declining enrollment. The result of the long-range facility plan is attractive, safe buildings and grounds that facilitate a world-class education, attracting families to the school district; facilities that are scaled to enrollment, resulting in efficient use of resources to allow for continued investment in staff while avoiding fiscal jeopardy; and facilities that are the pride of La Crosse. I'll go through the key tasks with a little. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, that has been created by administration, that's not a board.
This is administration's long-range facility plan.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Key task number 1, reduce the number of elementary buildings. This is to ensure instructional resources are available and to create fiscal stability. Elementary buildings are at 68% of capacity on average at this time, and low enrollment in buildings leads to a loss of instructional capacity. Under-enrolled buildings also result in additional expense. The task over the next 5 years, the school district should reduce the number of elementary schools by 2 to 3. The primary buildings to consider are Emerson, Hinchin, Northwoods, Spence, and Summit due to a combination of age and location.
Dr. Engel, could you, I think just for the sake of context, talk a little bit more about how low enrollment leads to direct loss of instructional capacity? Because I think there's almost a sense in which that's counterintuitive, because fewer students with the same number of staff, you would think we have more capacity, but that doesn't.
Has to teach elsewhere for a third, quarter of the day. That teacher isn't there to help assist with that student's challenges or needs. It also reduces flexibility when you don't have full-time specialists in buildings. You can't create master schedules that fully take advantage of all the folks that are there. You're stuck with limited amounts of time in which to deliver those services because folks aren't available. Same thing for filling in, helping out during the course of a day, flexible time. If you don't have full-time specialists, there's an impact on what you can deliver. As we get lower enrollment, sometimes you get a bubble class or a smaller class coming through, and we end up having to have split classrooms, so like second and third graders together. And in a philosophically intentional design, multi-age, like a Cooley Montessori environment, that certainly is desirable. But when it's not a planned for strategy, if it's ad hoc because you're adapting to low enrollment, that creates challenges that we don't prefer that have potential impacts on students. And then there's costs that come from running buildings that aren't fully staffed. You still need custodial support, you still need school nutrition support, you still need AA and building principal support. And if you had those co-located in one place instead of spread out over multiple, you'd be able to pay less to operate buildings and spend more on delivering services and resources to students on a daily basis. And so those are some of the challenges of under-enrolled buildings.
I think that's just helpful context.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question about, and this came up at a linkage at Longfellow too, a question about how capacity is determined. Like, is that based on when the school was built, or, and this is what the builders thought was the capacity for the building? How is the percent capacity, or the capacity numbers adjusted for modern day learning environments? One of the examples that was provided at Longfellow was, even though they technically aren't at capacity, they're finding challenges, finding a spare room to work one-on-one with a kid, or some of the shared spaces feel overcrowded. So like how are these numbers determined?
Well, and at the elementary linkage, they talked about having reset rooms, right, which probably weren't planned for originally, to have spaces where students could go for 10 minutes to regulate and then return to class.
Well, and for the investments we're making in addressing childhood mental health, like that requires one-on-one space too. So in the context of a modern education and the more current needs of students, like how do these numbers fit that equation?
Yeah, we work with architects, by and large, to look at floor plans and spaces to understand what's legally required and also educationally consistent with today's standards. Generally speaking, though, what we look at is the number of classrooms that are present, and you start with that. And you think about how many students could you accommodate for the typical class size that we would be looking at. And then you also have to accommodate for specials and special education and some of those things. Some of the modern amenities we've been able to achieve have come because there is space available. They're more, we often see them as needs today. They would certainly have been wants just a few years ago, depending on space available. And they're useful in meeting our students' needs. But if you look at the core needs of an elementary building, you would be planning for those. Something like Northside Elementary. If you're building new, they're thinking about each of those types of spaces, and that's how we're thinking about our existing buildings and assessing what their needs would be. So it certainly moves forward with the times. Historically, class sizes at the secondary level were probably 30, 35 in the 80s and early 90s. We don't find that is the best way to instruct kids today, to give sort of feedback and project-based learning you might be using. And our class sizes have changed to 35 or 25 at the secondary level, and with accommodations for things like music or tech ed, where there's an opportunity to have more or a need to have fewer.
Thank you.
Key task number two is replace, renovate, or repurpose elementary facilities. We want to extend the life cycle of facilities in the school district inventory and provide modern educational spaces, as we just talked about. The average square foot age of the district's elementary buildings is 43 years old, so a little younger than our district as a whole. And the key tasks here are over the next 12 years, replace or substantially renovate Emerson, Spence, and Summit if they are kept in the inventory. Over the next 20 years, renovate Hamilton and State Road to modernize older portions of those buildings. And over the next 25 years, repurpose elementary facilities that are no longer used as schools for community benefit.
So, and I just want to note that pending the board's decision, these specific key tasks, the items underneath each, can change.
Absolutely. Correct. The goal is to be adaptable to whatever the short-term course of action comes up with, but as certain things are checked off, so to speak, it will impact what's left on
Sure.
this list. Key task number 3, invest in public-facing facilities. The intent here is to invest available one-time funds into school district facilities that are public-facing. Some of our current spaces are outdated and insufficient for modern needs. Over the next 5 years, we should renovate performing arts and athletic facilities. Over the next 10 years, renovate school entryways. And over the next 25 years, build new or renovate other existing public spaces to benefit students and the community.
What kind of examples could you give as far as entryways? I mean, we put a lot of money into, in the last 10 years, making entryways more safer, and so what's the vision with that?
Yeah, we have great entryways in a lot of our buildings, and those additions done in the 2000s were great. There are still some logistical challenges. The renovation of the central high school office took care of one there. The primary entrance was on the back side of the building, but to get to the office, you needed to go up stairwells and try and find it. It led us to having visitors kind of walking through the building in ways that weren't ideal. It's not as significant a challenge at Logan High School, but the location of the office is internal, and there's an opportunity, I think, to move it to the outside of the building in some way so that we can provide more security and a better opportunity to engage visitors as they come in. The Logan Middle School doesn't have quite the same challenge, but the entryway isn't as welcoming as we would like it to be. You're coming in under this kind of dark overhang, and there's an opportunity to really refresh the public face of that building and how people approach it to create a more inviting environment for students and families. Those are the two primary ones that we see, but I think we need an assessment of all of our public-facing spaces to create really welcoming environments to families and students as they're entering our buildings. Examples for the performing arts and athletic facilities: the central auditorium is original to 1967 and really needs to be updated to support the amazing music, theater, drama, arts programs that we have. And Logan High School's football field is in great condition. It's turf. It really serves a great purpose, but the bleachers, press box are old, and the track is only 6 lanes, meaning we can't host much more than duels there. We should really be maximizing the use of that facility, and so an 8-lane track should be put in. Those are 2 examples of facilities that would really add to the experiences of our students and really provide a better experience for our community members that come and visit and show off our school district.
Longfellow hosts their band concerts at Central's auditorium, and since absorbing more than half of Lincoln, there's standing room only, and it's been 2 rows of people standing in the back. There's nowhere to, I mean, it's so packed.
Absolutely. Key task number 4, invest in underdeveloped career and technical education facilities. We want to be able to provide CTE facilities to provide world-class opportunities for all of our students. Our current CTE facilities are not sufficient to provide a comprehensive modern education, and as a result, students are not exposed to or prepared for the full range of careers that they could experience after high school. And so over the next 5 years, we ought to renovate the Logan High School career and technical education facilities and construct an addition to Central High School for career and tech ed facilities.
I heard a hand raise. Jeff, did you raise your hand or no? Oh, okay, sorry.
And we are fortunate to have great partnerships with Western Technical College and others to provide some of these facilities, but those are usually capstone facilities for juniors and seniors, not the introductory facilities we need to create the opportunities to excite students to get into these fields. And for some, going to a technical college isn't something they feel comfortable with. And so we want to provide opportunities locally for students to experience the full range of career and tech ed as well. And key task number 5, adapt to future declining enrollment. This is a long-range goal that we need to just keep our eye on over time. But over the next 25 years, consider reducing the number of secondary facilities when secondary enrollment decline impacts instruction and opportunities, and when it's necessary to avoid fiscal jeopardy. And the same can be said of our elementary facilities. Over the next 25 years, consider future consolidation if enrollment decline impacts the availability of instructional resources and there's a financial need to create fiscal stability. There are two additional tasks that we identified that aren't as critical but important to consider as we move forward. Retain property to adapt to the future. While we are currently experiencing fewer students in our schools, it's hard to anticipate what the future will bring, and retaining property that we have available to us will allow us to be flexible for the future. And then acquire property near our high schools to provide nearby parking and athletic facilities for physical education and extracurricular opportunities. Those are both challenges right now, both in delivering daily curriculum to students as well as the opportunities they need and our community needs to access those extracurriculars. So those are things to consider as well.
So if properties are retained, how will the buildings be used? I mean, it seems, just thinking as like, how the community experiences a school, whether their child is attending or it's in the neighborhood. If there's an empty building, it's like a continued sore spot. Will the buildings, if they are retained, be used for anything, or is it just holding it? Like that piece feels complicated, right? And how will they be used, I guess?
Yeah, I think there's a number of opportunities depending on how things play out in the short and long term. This building is old and in need of a lot of maintenance. Maybe an elementary school could be repurposed for an administrative center somewhere else, if that makes sense. Daycare has been a challenge in our community, providing opportunities for low-cost use of buildings for our community could be an opportunity potentially. Community centers to allow public use of our facilities, partnerships with universities and others for adult education. While this building is used for an administrative center, the gymnasium is also used for voting. It's used for tax preparation for the elderly in the area. The green space is used daily, almost year-round by community members in the neighborhood, as well as the YMCA for rec programs and the city. So there's lots of opportunities with all of our buildings, I think, to rethink what those purposes are, work with neighborhood associations, work with the city to repurpose them for the time being. Some may also be near secondary facilities to provide opportunities for athletic facilities for a time being, until some future need may be identified as well.
When I look at
Can I bring up one thing, please?
Of retaining,
Scott trying to say something.
is that Scott?
Yeah.
Scott.
I apologize.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know how to raise my hand over the phone, so I apologize. I just have to bring up one thing as we talk about keeping some of these facilities, which, we'll talk about later. Personally, I have questions, but the cost of keeping facilities is something also we got to keep in mind, because if we're holding on to these facilities, some work has to be done to them, as well as we're going to have to staff them. Even at a minimal, we're still going to have to staff them. Plus, we're going to have to heat it, and if they have air, we'll probably have air conditioning. So that's something that we have to consider as we talk further about keeping some of these facilities that will be closed, or when they're closed, open long term. Thank you.
Scott, you actually hit on something I was going to bring up as well, is that I guess part of me is not as concerned with the building, whether it's there or not. If it's there, we should be using it, and if it's not, then we have an empty canvas that could be used in the future for a new facility. We need to retain the property, because otherwise, as we learned through the referendum, there is not a lot of property in the city to put new facilities in. And so if we were to give up those lots at some point, we're going to also give up a potential opportunity for us to have another space for us to build new facilities. And so we would be impacting our abilities to have newer facilities for our students in that way. And I know some of our buildings were built in a way that additions are next to near impossible to add on, given how they are laid out on the lot that we have. So I think that's also something that we need to consider as we move forward.
I agree, and I also agree with Mr. Neumeister's concerns about, you know, if we have the properties, we have to maintain them and pay for them, so we need to balance that. But I think that the burden of being long-sighted is thinking, well, what if the demographics do change? And what does being flexible and adaptable, it's double-edged, right? If our trends continue as they're predicted to, we'll see one thing. But if we no longer have a lot of property and we start having more and more students again at some point in the future, I mean, 2050, a lot can happen with birth rates in that time frame. Not being able to adapt in the other direction, I think, would also be short-sighted.
Feels just so confusing to me. I'm sorry. I need like a real layman's terms of like, what's the point then of closing anything if we're going to keep the buildings? Like,
We wouldn't need to keep the buildings necessarily. They could be torn down as an option, right? And you would have green space then to potentially use for something else. The challenge is, let's say that hypothetically, this is just hypothetical, Spence was no longer used as an elementary building, and because it's older and has a lot of maintenance, the board could consider selling it off. Well, it's a near 8-acre site in the middle of the city. If the district ever wanted to build a middle school somewhere new, that would be a great site for one, potentially. If that wasn't in if the school district didn't have access to 8 acres in town, it would be impossible to find. You're never going to find that kind of a lot available for construction that's new somewhere. And you would either have to work within the spaces we currently have, which are undersized, or try and figure out how to tear something down elsewhere, you know. And so that would be the concern I would have, taking a long-term view, 2050, 2060, 2070. You know, the school district's going to be here for 100, 200, 300 years. You know, they're not
400
making...
according to the governor.
400 according to the governor. Thank you, Ms. Sukla. They're not gonna make more land. And so if we don't be good stewards of future school boards and administrations and provide them opportunities in the future, it may be very, very difficult to come by. And so it's just something to be thoughtful about. And from my perspective, I would recommend retaining property to adapt to the future. And what you do in the meantime is certainly a question, as Ms. Baumann brings up.
so the projected cost savings do not have an assumption of selling any of the properties?
That's correct.
Okay.
But do the projected cost savings include continuing to heat and maintain the facilities?
They do, because we don't reduce that expense. The annual cost to heat, maintain our buildings is, you know, around $100,000 for an elementary school. And it would be a little less if we weren't functioning fully as an elementary school. So those costs are, all things considered, relatively low. Much of the deferred maintenance is related to hosting staff and students in those buildings. That deferred maintenance could be deferred much further if we weren't intending to use it for the purposes we are currently. And so some of those costs are not as significant if you don't intend to use the buildings, you know, as they currently are.
I guess I struggle with retaining property that needs to be maintained and looking at the property that we're considering that has quite a bit of deferred maintenance, right? Like, you just pulled Spence out, not picking on Spence, but I know Spence has significant deferred maintenance and for really important stuff like roofing stuff, right? So we would need to, if it was going to be like a community space, maintain that, fix up the roof, but then we're investing funds that aren't directly tied to educating students into a building that isn't being used for our purpose. That's kind of where I come to struggle with the idea of retaining property, is then the funds that are intended to educate our students are being diverted to do this side thing, and our whole job is students. So I also, you know, if the building isn't being fully utilized, if we went that way, I don't see it being good for the district's reputation to have a space that's unused. I think it would always be a sore spot, especially as people in the community around it drive by it or walk by it and have memories of being in it with their kids, right? Like, those are the things that kind of make me feel weird about the property retention.
I struggle with this.
Newmeister's hands raised.
Go ahead, Scott.
I apologize. I think she just brings up some wonderful points there. I just want to bring up, people will talk about, well, it's going to cost us money to tear down a building. It is, but would be my guess at $100,000 each school, that's just in heat and air conditioning and, add electricity and everything else. I'm not opposed to holding on to the actual property. I just question the facility itself because I think it's going to nickel and dime us to death. And I think in the long term, we're probably not going to be able to do anything with that building at our new level of need anyway. So that's something I definitely think we need to look at. The property is not a concern. It's not, I don't think it's silly to hold on to. Value of property is never going to lose. You're not going to lose money on land, right? I understand that, but holding on to a building that is not structurally safe or sound, and there's a reason we're looking at closing at least one of the two, and that's one of the big reasons, is something we need to consider.
I'm struggling a little bit with this process because the long-range facility plan and these key tasks are the administrations and not the boards. So wordsmithing it is I'm not sure it's appropriate for us, but quite frankly, I think that retaining property to adapt to the future should be really defined more strategically. Retaining property to run a daycare, we are not in the business of being landlords. We are not in the business of that sort of, we're educators and we need to focus on our goal. And quite frankly, universities and such have run into IRS taxable issues when they start running and doing things that aren't inside of their non-taxable definition, and so I don't think that would fit for us. I think it would also be a struggle to retain properties in a broad sense, just for the sake of retaining for 50 years down the road, when we are going to go at some point and ask the public for, and continue to ask the public for additional resources, whether through referendum or just through the annual taxation process. And well, the public is saying, but you got all this property you could sell for some value. And understanding that when we sell property, it goes into a separate fund different than regular operations. But I think there is some strategy to retaining these properties, whether it's this exact property we're sitting on or any property in the city that the district has. But I think we retain property within a strategic plan. I think we need to define this piece of property is valuable to us. Why didn't we have this discussion when we did RFPs for Lincoln, for example? I think there's some properties we want to and some we don't, but we don't really know which ones are or aren't. I think it needs to be defined in a strategic plan what and how we retain and why and for what purpose. To retain it for maybe someday down the road will not go good with the public because they're going to say sell it and use that money instead of taxing me. So I think the purpose of retaining in itself isn't a bad idea, but how we do it and how we communicate it with the public really needs some strategic definition. But it's not mine to write.
I think you're also making a pretty big assumption about the nature of the tax relationship between the district and the public, and that there will always and forever be a continuing and increasing burden there, when one of the goals of doing this process and right-sizing is to reduce the need for such referenda.
But we have aging buildings. We will continually need to go and ask for referendum to update them. That was my intention.
No, and I don't disagree with that at all. And to that extent, I think, yes, the idea of retaining property that is already 100 years old, for example, or 60 years old, or pick your number, for the sake of retaining it is not a good idea. I agree with your idea that it needs to be purposeful and it needs to be strategic. I'm not quibbling about that.
So maybe the strategy evolves from the decisions that the board makes on what path we choose.
That would be
And so I'm assuming that since there's quite a bit of discussion, that the administration would probably come back to us and discuss the property retention of whatever is decided, if something is decided, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, retention of property is the board's sole responsibility. This is my recommendation as a part of a long-range facility plan to err on the side of retaining property for the future to lead to flexibility. Each time property is not used in the way it was historically, we'll have to come to that crossroads and rethink it. And so a 50-year view, a 25-year view to me says keep the property as a general rule in order to be prepared for the future. But there will be a unique circumstance each time property is used in a different way, and the board will have to grapple with that themselves with whatever data you ask for. So.
Well, we also need to remember that outside things impact it too, as like this building. Our hands are pretty tied pretty tight as to what we can do with it right now.
Potentially.
And so, potentially, but yes, that's another battle to take over. But I mean, so there are things that are outside factors that we don't have somewhat control over.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question in a different direction, since we have this up on the slide?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why, specific to school areas, we haven't thought about above and or below ground parking on a smaller footprint? I mean, I can think of reasons why you wouldn't want a relatively enclosed area out of view. But
It's just cost.
okay.
Going up or down is more expensive than resurfacing a flat area. And so when you're provided with limited dollars it's just a cost.
I'm just thinking of the idea of acquiring property near Central. I'm just, where? Right? There's not a lot of area to just acquire nearby, so.
Yeah, certainly, and this is a 25-year plan, so it's just asking us to continue to think about that problem as an enduring one that is likely to be there. You know, whether it's redoing how we do traffic on Travis Street, or something happen across the street with the festival someday, or can we put tennis courts on rooftops? You know, I don't know. Like, there's all sorts of like novel things you could come up with to create space, but at the end of the day, I see it as a need to expand the capability of our high schools and the opportunities that our students have access to on a daily basis.
And I guess I would re-highlight what Mr. Neumeister said, which I completely agree with. It's not necessarily the building property, it's the lot that really we need to consider moving forward for the future that we need to maintain. Buildings are buildings, they come and go. As you said, Dr. Engel, we can extend the life, quote unquote, of a building if we're not having people in it. But more importantly, I think we have heard from the referendum, we saw from the process the board used since 2020 to lead up to that referendum, that there's not a lot of property in the city. And so if that is one of the goals of the community, is to maintain schools in the city, you can't do it if you don't have a lot. So we need to, I think strategically, it is important for us to maintain those lots as much as possible if we can.
There's a visual timeline provided as well, if that helps people envision kind of the key tasks, with the fifth one being enduring and no timeline identified. That would bring us to the next item on our work plan, which is to consider facility options. And this is where I'll transition into the second document that we shared with the board, which is our course of action development and analysis. And I'll go through a little bit of the supporting work that provided parameters for how we identified these courses of action and facility options, and then walk through the possible courses of action that we put together to meet those criteria and turn it over to the board. So went back to the school board intent to guide us and what our goal was, what we're supposed to do. And that is the school board mission statement: to ensure resources are available to provide excellence in education. School board policy OE12, the superintendent shall ensure that physical facilities support the accomplishment of the board's results policies. So those are the two primary pieces of guidance as we started this process. There are a number of specified tasks that you can find in our policies from the board and our administration, and those are things that we considered as we were putting together these courses of action as well. Some of the ones we've identified are develop and execute a facility plan that establishes priorities for construction, renovation, and maintenance projects, ensure that facilities are safe, clean, and properly maintained, develop a budget that ensures fiscal soundness in future years, establish and maintain a learning environment that is physically safe, welcoming, inclusive, and conducive to effective learning, support innovation and best practices for teaching and learning, support diverse learning needs, ensure collaborative alignment with community resources, take into account building and site design standards, and address financial considerations of facilities repair and replacement. Along with the specified tasks, there's some that are implied from that and an essential task from our board mission. The most crucial implied tasks that we identified are replace and repair facilities on a regular basis, address and eliminate structural budgetary deficits, and ensure facilities are attractive and welcoming. And the most essential task, which comes from our board mission, is to ensure resources are available to provide excellence in education. There are some constraints we face that the school board dictates to administration and the school district. These come from our policies and good practice. The superintendent may not present for board approval a budget that plans for the expenditure in any fiscal year of more funds than are conservatively projected to be available during the year. We can't plan for a deficit budget. The superintendent may not provide for an anticipated year-end unassigned fund balance of less than 15 to 20% of the prior year's operating expenditures. We can't plan for an extensive use of fund balance. The superintendent may not permit facilities and equipment to be subject to improper use or insufficient maintenance. And one-time revenues may only be used for one-time expenses to avoid structural deficits. Wanted to highlight a few critical facts that guide these courses of action. Student enrollment has declined by 29% over the last 30 years in the district. Elementary buildings collectively are at 68% of capacity. School buildings are aging more rapidly than maintenance expenditures have been able to keep up with. And declining enrollment has led to a loss of $5.7 million in revenue limit authority since 2019 and will lead to another $1.3 million in loss of revenue limit authority in 2024. Some things I added in here just for, they represent facts in a way. These are our current elementary boundaries and the location of our elementary schools. And so this is helpful just as we think about courses of action and the way things play out in reality. And I think it gets to Mr. Jackson's recognition of disrupting other students when we think about boundaries in the future. Also included an elementary student location heat map. Green represents kind of average student location, and yellow and red are higher density of students and their location. And this shows their location across our school district. Clearly, students more often live in town than they do in the country and along some of our major arteries as you come to school. But this may be helpful for folks as well in terms of where students live and what that impact may be. Some assumptions that we used as we were developing these courses of action. State funding will remain stable. That's a pretty big assumption, but the current state law is that revenue limits will increase annually for the next 400 some years. And so we will take that as an assumption for now. Enrollment will continue to decline with projections. Financial projections predict a structural budget deficit of $2.4 to $3.6 million annually. And we'll confirm that, Mr. Jackson. Declining enrollment impacts on the budget will partially be mitigated by a reduction in staff and expenses of approximately $250,000 annually. So this will help mitigate that budget deficit through natural reductions. And if a capital referendum is chosen as a part of a course of action, the vote occurs in November 2024 with construction complete in 2027. And this was an assumption that allowed us to make courses of action that were actionable. And so this is certainly up to the school board and can be flexible, but that was what we used as a part of building out these courses of action, so you know where that started from. All right, with that, these are the facility options that we identified as discrete options and put together represent the courses of action that we chose as possibilities for the school board to consider. Some of those reduce one elementary school, including the closures of Northwoods, Emerson, Spence, Hinchin, or Summit. There are referenda to consolidate buildings, which would also result in the reduction of one elementary school, and these include Emerson and Spence in a new building, consolidation of Hinchin and Spence in a new building, and consolidation of Hinchin with Hamilton and State Road through additions at Hamilton and State Road. There's an option for referendum to consolidate Emerson, Spence, and Hinchin in a new building that would reduce 2 elementary schools. And then there's some additional options that are factored in here as well. Move Polytechnic to another location, change Northwoods to a choice-only IB school with no home boundary, create a charter elementary site in a closed building, create a 4K center in a closed building, close Hogan Administrative Center. And O is not a facility option necessarily, but represents our do-nothing approach. Manage structural deficit by laying off staff, cutting programs, limiting wage increases, and reducing benefits. So the facility options were used to put together courses of action. Of course, the board may have other facility options you want to consider. These are just the ones that we highlighted as we put together our courses of action to provide to the school board. The courses of action are potential options that represent key approaches, and there's a brief description of each in the statement. The outcome of these that are presented meet the board's intent, as we described before, to address structural deficits and provide the best instructional environment for students. Each of these courses of action involves the reduction of at least 2 elementary buildings and the reduction of at least $3 million in expenses by 2028. This next is a key one for me as it relates to our financial projections and deficit planning. If structural deficits are known to be addressed within 5 years, then temporary deficits may responsibly be covered through available short-term strategies. So if we know that we're going to cover a structural deficit in the next 5 years, we can accept some short-term strategies to get through a few years. But if we don't know that, then I can't present a balanced budget to the board that way then. These options may include short-term reductions in payments towards long-term obligations, additional staffing reductions, or modified wages and benefits. We have a few temporary strategies to address short-term deficits.
Is it possible, so that's the wiggle room clause, right?
Yep.
Is it possible to put a cap on, like an actual number to, what is the limit of responsibility there? How much room do we have? And it may not at this moment be possible to say that, but if you have a ballpark even.
I'd be hesitant to provide a ballpark. It depends for how long, in part. And if the board's seeking kind of like a specific number, we can do a more full analysis of what that could look like. As an example, a 1%, so let's say that we didn't provide 1% in wage increases. You're talking $600,000, $700,000 potentially of savings for 1 year and the future. So that would be an option, but it impacts our ability to attract and retain staff. And that has been a challenge in this time. Benefits changes are an option. Those can be temporary or permanent, but those are have impacts on attraction and retention and providing a quality of life to especially our lowest paid employees in general.
Well, you can't control those costs because it's also, for example, with insurance, it's based on usage.
Totally, yeah. And then short-term or long-term obligations, we have post-employment benefits, and we want to ensure that those funds are stable and available to our staff in the future. We could potentially impact some of those short-term or long-term to affect savings, but some of those won't have a long-term impact on the benefit available, but they impact the financial stability of those in the future. And so maybe we reduce payments to a fund balance for a period of time, but then it impacts the likelihood of that benefit being available to our staff in the future. And so, there's some risk involved in that as well. And so these are options that can get us through a period of time, and each of them have greater or lesser risk based on the analysis thereof. And so I simply present this to say that we do have some options short term, as long as we know that we're going to balance the budget in the future. But if we don't know that, then I can't responsibly present a budget to the board that uses some of these strategies.
And to be clear, what you're saying in terms of short term would be 5 years or less.
Exactly. And of course, other courses of action may be developed and other options explored and analyzed. These are starting points for the school board and ones that we feel meet the board's intent as they're created here. Course of action number 1 is do not address facilities. And this would be that option O, to manage the structural budget deficits by laying off staff, cutting programs, limiting wage increases, and reducing benefits. This strategy involves a $3 million budget cut, of which 80% comes from salary and benefits, and 20% would come from other expenses. The result would be laying off 35 to 45 staff members, impacting support and programs available to students, and a 2% general budget cut, which will negatively impact teaching supplies, extracurricular opportunities, and professional development.
That's a huge number of staff.
It is.
I have a quick question. I understood that, so we've got public speakers starting at 8 o'clock, and it is 7:24. I understood that some of this was going to be discussion by the board, and there's a number of options to still go through. Is the board discussing anything tonight, or we're just listening to the staff presentation?
Yeah, so the intent was to receive all of the information at once, so we didn't keep anybody on the board or in the community waiting on the information that the administration is presenting. We will have time still tonight, I believe, to discuss as a board. We're not making any decisions tonight.
Correct.
So
I understood
there will
that.
still be more time at our next meeting to discuss more as we go. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock. Aaron's working through, this last bit is looking at maps of options. And then we
Pending
will pause.
questions, 10 minutes maybe to get through the options themselves, and that should leave 25 minutes for the board to take it wherever they desire.
We have 4 meetings committed to this. So my intent was the first meeting, we get it all. And the remaining meetings, we have time to, an hour, 2 hours to talk more deeply about what's presented. Okay.
Course of action number 2 is the Facility Advisory Committee's recommendation. The general principle they chose was to locate elementary schools where students live. This would involve in 2024 closing Northwoods and Hinchin, and to achieve the $3 million in reduced expenses, moving Polytechnic to Central High School. This graphic shows that along with the closure of Northwoods, the IB program would move to Northside Elementary School. And the subsequent maps in 27 and 28 show the resulting landscape with those closures and the schools taken off the map. There'll be similar slides shown for the next courses of action as well, 27 and 28 being important, being that a referendum, if it were to occur, would happen in 24 with construction complete in 27. So that's the first time a building would come offline if a referendum were involved. So that's course of action number 2. Course of action number 3 is a consideration that the Facility Advisory Committee had, which was reduced deferred maintenance. This involves closing Emerson and Spence, our 2 elementary buildings with the highest identified deferred maintenance, and Polytechnic moving to Central, all in 2024. The result would be $3 million in savings, a reduced expense. And then the subsequent 27 and 28 maps show what the landscape looks like with those elementary buildings removed. Course of action number 4 would involve a referendum to combine Emerson and Spence at the Hogan site. This maximizes reduction in deferred maintenance. And it would require covering temporary deficits with those short-term reductions that we talked about just recently. In 2024, it moves Polytechnic to Central. And then a referendum would be necessary in '24 that was successful to consolidate Emerson and Spence. Here it's shown located at the Hogan site as an option. Administration could potentially move to the Emerson building in the future. There's an option listed in 2027 as well, and it's the option H. Part of the referendum could also be to consolidate Hinchin with Hamilton and State Road through additions at those schools, allowing a second building to be closed at that time. And then in 2028, projects closure of one of Hinchin, Summit, or Northwoods to achieve the expense reduction we're looking for. Course of action number 5 involves a referendum as well to combine Hinchin and Spence, here shown at the Spence site. This would help maximize elementary locations where students live, and as such it involves the closure of Northwoods in 2024 with the movement of the IB program to North Side. It would require a referendum in '24 with construction completed in '27 to combine Spence and Hinchin at the Spence site, and then the closure of Summit in 2028. Course of action number 6 also involves a referendum to combine 3 schools, Emerson, Spence, and Hinchin, here shown at the Spence site. This would involve Northwoods becoming a non-boundary school and the IB program continuing to be maintained there as a choice option, with Polytechnic moving to Northwoods to reduce a building. It would require a referendum in '24 with construction complete in '27 to consolidate Emerson, Spence, and Hinchin in a new building. And then as an option, if it was of interest or a need, to close Summit in 5 years, in '28. And option, or course of action number 7, this was one that kind of developed out of looking at where enrollment's located in our school district and how to maximize building utilization while providing the most socioeconomic balance. If you look at where students experiencing poverty in our school district live, it's kind of along the river. And as you move east toward the bluffs, it kind of reduces as you move geographically east. If you were to create horizontal attendance boundaries that would still be contiguous, you would be able to mitigate socioeconomic differences between our elementary schools. And so in this plan, it would cut our socioeconomic difference in half, with the lowest being 47% and the highest being 67%. This would involve closing Spence and Summit. Northwoods would become a charter school elementary, so Cooley Montessori, Soda 1, and Northwoods IB program would be located there. Hinchin would become a 4K center until 2028, when we saw a 10% decline in elementary enrollment and would be able to fit the 4K programs back at home boundary schools. That is all I have for potential courses of action. Of course, the board can identify modifications, options, further things, and direct the administration in any way you would like to facilitate your discussion, questions, clarifications, and requests for information. I have the tentative agenda for January 22nd listed here as well for the board's benefit as you think about next steps.
All right, thank you for finishing that presentation. It only took a couple more minutes. We now have an opportunity to discuss some of these options. Again, no decisions are being made tonight. We did not give the community adequate warning to let them know that decisions would be made. So this is an opportunity to discuss the options that are presented without necessarily unofficially voting, if that makes sense. So we're not choosing something tonight. Just want to be clear on that.
I have just a quick question to start things off. The idea of moving the IB program to another location has been contested pretty regularly through public comments at our board meetings. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we reached out to the International Baccalaureate folks, and what we received from them was that there's a preference that it not be a program in a building, but that it be part of its own school. Schools are not buildings, and so if we move the International Baccalaureate program, I would anticipate it would retain the Northwoods International School designation. We have multiple schools and buildings right now. Cooley Montessori, Soda are in Northside and Hamilton respectively. It would be a similar situation. It would be its own school. The other primary concern that we identified is they prefer having a dedicated administrator to that program who's trained, and that's something that we would examine as we got through that process. Of course, we want a trained administrator to help lead that program, and we have a couple of options as we think through it in the future. We have a dean of students currently located at Northside Elementary. In the future, perhaps it's a second formal administrator who also has that training.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I understood that there was going to be more discussion and more opportunity for board discussion, so I'm just going to start while we've got a little bit of time. Partially, I thought we were going to do more discussion this evening, and that way if we had some critical pieces of information that we were wanting, that administration could bring it back to the next meeting versus discussing it at the next meeting and not having that opportunity.
So before you keep going, if there are critical pieces of information that you want for the next meeting, can you bump those to the top of your discussion now so Erin can take notes on that?
First of all, I think that the community expects the board to do something, say something about the facility advisory group, and I just want to really make sure that we thank those community members. They volunteered a lot of time, put in a lot of homework, took a lot of abuse in the public, unlike us who voluntarily put our name on the ballot and know what we're in for. They were trying to do good things. And understand that that process was created prior to 4 of us even being at this table. I attended the majority of the meetings. I was the only board member that did. I do also want to recognize that Mr. Jackson was at quite a few meetings as well. And understanding what happened at those meetings and just reading the report, there's some pieces in between. And I think that the process was flawed in many ways. For example, even the survey was discussed at the first meeting, community survey. There was a lot of discussion about it. Everyone left that room assuming they'd have more opportunities for input on
Ms.
it.
Sukla,
and at the next meeting.
will you get to the task at hand? So we are looking mostly at these options tonight. I think it's appropriate to thank the FAC for their work, but are you?
The FAC is the basis of these recommendations, and so I was going to address that.
Sure, go ahead.
It's very difficult to do this job when I'm extremely limited in what I'm allowed to say. The big basis of this was the FAC, which obviously if I say any more, I'm sure I'll be shut off. The other basis of it is the enrollment issue. And yes, there is a declining birth rate. When you look in the report, the budget report, I believe it's on page 27, if you look at, I just broke it out into 5 years, and that was 4 years. There is a declining, there are documents received that there's been a decline over the last 30 years, and it's made it sound like this terrible thing that's been going on for a long period of time. If you look at 2009, 10 to the 4 years up to 13, 14, we saw a decline of 211 children, or about 3%. If you looked at the next 5-year segment of 14, 15 on up the 5 years, we saw a decline of 173 kids, or 2.5%. If you look at the last 5 years, we saw a decline of 843 kids, or a 13% drop. There is a birth rate decline, clearly, but that does not define what's been happening these last 5 years. COVID was part of this, but every year we see hundreds of kids fewer coming to this district. And this definition of enrollment is the issue in pushing us doing all these things, and we haven't really discussed what's going on with enrollment. I think we as a board are missing part of the issue. It's also, I want to make sure that, I won't go there. Not allowed to say that either. In the options given to us, there's no provision for the Hogan building, although we received a lot of public comment about this, and this is one of our oldest building other than Polytechnic. There's no provision for the aging middle schools. All of three of them, or both of the middle schools were built in 1939, the same year as the oldest elementary building, which is also going to remain on course according to the FAC report. And there's no provision what we're going to do other than the FAC was provided a bunch of pictures of what could possibly be in middle and high school buildings. They were asked to prioritize the needs of them without any dollar amounts. And then the dollar amounts were created on a document, which is attachment G, which was not provided in the report and was eliminated from that report. Our middle schools are both old, and I am concerned that this proposal, that the priorities that have been given don't include anything about the middle schools. I agree that we need to look at our boundaries and our alignment of our schools to align from elementary to middle to high school. That's not going to be easy, but I think it's something that needs to happen. But most importantly, I'm struggling with the ownership of the long-range facility plan and these key tasks being with administration. It puts us as a board in a reaction mode versus an ownership mode versus us discussing and developing and creating and going through that whole process of really owning this. It's a difficult place for us to be in, and for example, it shows the interest of this board, just the discussion on the property retention issue. I think those are some concerns that I'm seeing in this report for some options. I think the board has a variety of creative options that are available to discuss. I have been frustrated at the fact that there's 4 elementary schools that have been coming to us for the last number of months. Staff are stressed out of their mind, being asked by parents and community members what's going to happen, and they have been emailed and told that they can't say anything negative. We've got students, and I've said it here at a number of meetings, that have been struggling with, am I going to my school with my friend next year or am I not? And this has dragged on many months, and I respect that the board chair is trying to move this process expediently to address that. But quite frankly, the fact that public input wasn't allowed during any of the FAC process till the very end, and even board members, I asked that we discuss it, and it wasn't allowed. When we created the 4-year-old kindergarten project, which daycares were very concerned about, parents were very concerned about. We did a lot of work. We had public meetings, and we said, here's what we're thinking so far. What do you think about that? Then we did more work, and we came out. When we came out with it, there was so much community support. And this board isn't afraid of making tough decisions. That's our job. We've done it for years. We sometimes get a yes and sometimes we get a no. I think some members here at this table are really affected by the no referendum, but I think it's a learning opportunity what this public supports. And this public supports public education. They support us having buildings, and I think we as a board need to be looking at win-win opportunities versus taking things away from individuals. I think finding a way that we can merge 2 buildings. I think we have to close some schools. I think that's just the fact based on the numbers. Again, I'm not sure why the numbers are declining as rapidly as they are, but I do think we have to do some closures. But instead of closures, I think, as a number of our public speakers have said, what happened on the north side is the answer. It's the win-win answer, is how do you combine 2 schools instead of closing one? How do you combine them and bring them together? On the north side, we created kind of one school so they could combine their cultures, and then the building was financed for them. And I think that's the option that we have to look at. Personally, I think looking at the 2 oldest elementary schools would make some sense, but then that doesn't align with the elementary, middle, high school to Logan and to Central. So I think we'd probably have to look at a couple other of the schools, but I think that's the best option. I think we should be looking at win-win opportunities for this district. And I just want to apologize to the public. I think this has been really difficult. I'm so pained by the tears and the pain that public speakers have brought to us. I think all of us as board members have been affected by that. And I want the public to know that we've heard that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I thank you for sharing. I agree on my own personal opinion that I would favor an option that is more of a win rather than a loss. So finding ways to consolidate through referendum. And I appreciate that there are those options presented to us in a variety of ways where we can kind of look at that. Ms. Sukla, are you asking for the long-range facility plan to include more planning around the middle schools, the aging middle schools?
I'm asking that the long-range facility plan be owned by the board and created by the board with input from administration, and I would like it to include discussions about the Hogan site as well as the middle schools, yes.
Okay. Is there additional information that you are requesting from the administration?
Yeah, if that were to happen, then, for example, well, I think if you flesh those out, I think that will provide the additional information. I think.
Can I add a specific in there? Because Dr. Engel and I, we had a short conversation about this. Addressing the Hogan facility, it's something that we've heard a lot about whether there are plans, when there have been plans. It's been a conversation that has happened, it's cropped up for many, many years, and my understanding is that there are numbers behind it, and that we want to be able to think carefully about what's the cost of operating the building as it is, but also what are the anticipated costs of potentially moving our centralized administration, potentially diffusing it among multiple spaces, and how does that balance out?
Looks like it's now plan number 4.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep, one of the options, the one to consolidate Emerson and Spence into a school is at the Hogan site. So it would close the Hogan Admin Center effectively as an admin center. It would rebuild into a new building that would be an elementary.
Under the facility options, under the course of action development, I think Appendix A kind of goes through the benefits and drawbacks of each of those options very briefly. And so there's a little bit in there on Hogan as well. If the board wants more of that fleshed out, happy to provide that also.
Yes, go.
I have a question that's maybe off topic. It's not off topic, but maybe outside the lane. You can tell me and stop me. But we have the do nothing option, and I think one of the things we learned from all the public comment and from the failed referendum is that La Crosse's weird geographical shape means that it likes lots of small schools that people can get to and lots of choices that people can have. It's one of the things that our district offers. Do we have like the pie in the sky dream plan referendum to repair and upgrade each of these schools to keep it facilitated, working? I mean, maybe it would only be useful as an academic exercise, as a comparison to like what it would cost if we kept every school as it is and had it run until it really became unfeasible to run it any longer.
So it would be like an operating referendum cost of maintaining.
It might be a capital referendum to make repairs, like Emerson's an old school, Spence has construction issues, we know this from the facilities. Like, what would the referendum need to be to fix those? What would operating costs need to be to keep staff for support staff and stuff? So it could be a combination, I guess, for these things. But it would be nice, at least as a baseline, I think, to have that as a point of comparison to some of the other options that we're trying to do. And it would give the public an opportunity to say, we do want all these things, but maybe we can't afford all these things, I don't know.
I think that makes sense. And I asked for a do-nothing approach to kind of flush out the context of the decisions that we're making, like the considerations that the board is taking on.
And I think that was helpful, because if we don't do something to stem our costs structurally, we will have to make cuts in other places.
Yeah, and I think like the flip of the do nothing is the
do everything,
do all the things. How do you pay for all the things?
So yeah, what's the do everything? Anyway, just something to think about.
Mr. Jackson does have his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. So I got a quick list. So you ready, Dr. Engel?
I'm ready.
All right, man. So I looked through the operational savings. You got like 1.4 million savings for Northwoods, the equal amount to Emerson at 1.4. can we get some more detail on where those numbers are being driven from so we can understand what, so we can tell the story to not only ourselves, but the community at large. If we do this, here's what's going to go away, but also at the same time, what are we going to get? Because if I'm a parent and could be affected by any of these, I would want to know, okay, if I have to go through this hardship, here's what I'm going to get. Not only the parents, but also every linkage I've been at with our teachers and staff has been, they're stressed, they don't have enough resources. We talked about the efficiencies that we would gain, so what would that look like at a building level so that we can understand what we would be giving them matches the needs that we actually have. So I would like a little more detail on that, because right now it just looks like we've kind of replicated numbers. 1.4 at Northwoods, same thing at 1.4 at Emerson. What's that drive? And the Hinchin, Spence are the same. So it's showing 1 million savings. Close Hinchin, same thing at Spence. So I think that looks a little too cookie cutter to me, so I really want to understand where those numbers come from. So that's first. The poly site. So if we did, because that's kind of a new wrinkle in there, we talked about potentially moving poly to from the downtown site, which is an older building, but has got a lot of work put into it. It's probably one of our more modern facilities. What would we do with it? I think there's some potential, whether is that a property you'd be looking to sell? Is this a property you'd be looking to keep and repurpose potentially for maybe our public-facing part of our Hogan team? It could be a great site for that. But again, I think I'd want a little bit more detail on what that looks like. And then the last piece, because I've tried to play the Tetris, given the information we've been given through the past few months, and I don't, so any of these options where we're talking about moving an entire facility to another facility, based on the building metrics that you gave us as far as how many students it could house, none of these are a 1-for-1 equal. We'd still have to redistrict some of these sites. So whether you consolidated Hinchin and Spence or moved Northwoods over, I don't know if we have enough capacity based on the numbers you gave us, at least, not you, but the numbers that we were given and the FAC was given. So I would, again, that goes back to that comment I'd make about redistricting. I think we'd have to really understand it's not just probably a 1-for-1 Tetris, but I think there's going to be multiple buildings that would be affected with any of these consolidation discussions. So I think I'd want a little bit more detail around, if we do some of these, what would we be looking to do, and would we be looking to read boundary some of our schools? But I do support what Ms. Sukla said. I mean, we have to understand right now some of these options are really putting we're consolidating a lot of the north side, so the Logan feeder schools, with less impact to the schools that are feeding into Central. And again, I'm looking at the disparity of that because we've already done this on the north side with the north side school. But we continue to push both Summit and Northwoods, as well as an option with Emerson. So all these schools feed into Logan, and that seems like we're continually pushing on that group of people rather than look at the south side schools where we have a lot more physical buildings, and a lot of them are located actually pretty close. So I think those are the big things I would want to look at, because I'd really want to understand, especially from the special education standpoint, if there's going to be extra resources around some of these schools, because we have a lot of students of need in these schools. So I think that is it.
Thank you.
If I can just clarify, so what I heard, Mr. Jackson, was what are the efficiencies gained and what do they look like with a little more detail? With the poly site option, what will we do with it in more detail about what that looks like in the future? And then with these options, given that some of them kind of cut across boundaries differently than with the Facility Advisory Committee, what would redistricting look like with those options?
Correct. And then any extra services it would be getting, so as the efficiencies, what also would they be getting with some of the cost savings and the efficiencies we'd be gaining? So what extra services would they be getting, both for our teachers' sake as well as for our families?
Excellent. I will put that together.
Is there any other specific information items that Dr. Engel can prepare for the next meeting? Otherwise, our next meeting will be looking at these. If you have other consolidation scenarios that you want to run, or other scenarios that don't consider consolidation, now would be a good time to share a request for that, so we can get some numbers on what that would look like and how to make that work over this 24, 28 timeline.
Can I just make a quick comment, please?
Yep.
I just have to add the last two speakers. Obviously, I think they hit the nail on the head. Obviously, I've been out of the loop, but I've been getting a lot of phone calls and emails and stuff, and people stopping to talk to me. And both of them have brought up great concerns that we really need to be proactive on and get some answers to, because I, like many, this affects us all, but we don't want it to be tilted to one way or the other. So we got to do our due diligence and make sure that when we are voting on something, it's something we fully understand and wholeheartedly believe has to be done. And I think there's a lot more questions to be answered as we move forward before this decision can even become close to being had. So I appreciate all the questions just brought up. And again, I obviously couldn't have said them better myself, otherwise I would have, so I let them. So thank you so much.
My job is to provide you with the information you need, so you let me know, and I will do my best to gather that as quickly as possible, whether it's tonight or something you're thinking on the car ride to work in a week. If you let me know and hopefully loop in Ms. Bauman, we'll do our best to provide all the information you need to make the best possible decision.
Yep, and so if you go home, talk to some neighbors or constituents and have other scenarios you want to run, just email me or Erin, and then for our next meeting, we'll be able to talk through those options.
I have a quick question. The long-range facility plan proposed tonight talks about investments in the 2 high school campuses. Does that mean that we are no longer considering consolidating those anymore?
From my perspective, the community spoke clearly that they want 2 high school campuses. It is addressed in our long-range facility plan as something to keep our eye on if enrollment changes or it impacts the opportunities our students have. But at this point, I heard from the community pretty clearly that they want 2 high school campuses, and we're able to deliver the instruction and opportunities that we need to for our kids right now in that model, and so I can support that.
Okay.
If in the future the board sees it differently, or enrollment starts to impact the opportunities that kids have, or there's an opportunity for some reason, I would also support a different path.
One last question. In the model that combines Emerson and Spence at Hogan, would they then split for middle school according to how the boundaries are right now?
Yeah, I think to Mr. Jackson's point, if some of these options cut across boundaries a little bit differently, with the Facility Advisory Committee, the goal was to keep boundaries that aligned with the secondary boundaries to keep students together. With most of the referenda options that are listed here, we'd have to really relook at boundaries, and we'd probably have more disruption to kind of assigned boundaries, and then also that secondary piece. There would be elementary schools that would feed both middle schools. The primary locations would be in the current state Rhode Island, Emerson, Hamilton neighborhoods more than anywhere else. Potentially State Road / Northwoods, depending on where it comes across to the Bluffs.
So we've got 4 minutes before our public speakers begin, and unless our public speakers are in the room right now, I don't want to plow ahead. I see a yes. We have 1. Do we have our second public speaker also in the room? Okay, so we'll just kind of sit tight. Any last thoughts on this before we move on to public speaking?
Can I ask to see one more scenario next week?
Yep.
I don't know if Northwoods would need to become a charter in order to accomplish this, and this might be harebrained, but what about moving Soda into Northwoods, closing Spence, and splitting that between Hamilton predominantly Hamilton, but then some could go to Hinchin or State Road too.
Could you say that one more time?
Moving Soda out to Northwoods, Soda 1, closing Spence, and moving a good chunk of Spence into Hamilton District, and then some would probably go to Hinchin and State Road as well.
I can provide that.
I don't know.
Are these under the assumption that we'd still have year-round school at Northwoods?
North side.
At this time, there's an assumption that we would continue the Northwoods or the North Side year-round program.
I'm sorry, I
Yep.
said-
But depending on the choices made, it could impact the viability of that. We intend to do an assessment of that program at some point in the future, much like we did at Hamilton, to ensure it's delivering on the promise that we made when we started it. But that is a consideration depending on the volume of students that are located there that would need access to a traditional program. We would have to potentially rethink that. We won't want probably 3 schools in one building unless it was very intentional around that. So.
Other scenarios to get numbers on. There are a lot of schools, a lot of considerations, a lot of moving around. Scenarios that don't consider closures, we have the do nothing, we have the go for all. Is there anything else that we want to
I think on the
see?
referendum options, we're going to need some ballpark numbers as to what those would look like.
Okay,
Yeah, that's true.
so cost of a new building.
The estimated cost, I mean, I think it's still pretty vague, so again, at best we'll get a ballpark number.
Okay, so ballpark numbers for cost of a new building. Some of these also include potential to add on to Hamilton and State Road, so estimates for those.
I guess I would also look at if something new is built to provide capacity in that building for the staff that are currently at Hogan, and closing this site is an option, like a option 3A or something. And what savings would be a result of that?
So if we didn't consolidate at Hogan, Emerson and Spence, if there was some other option chosen but still close Hogan, is that kind of where you're
If we're
going with that one?
building new,
But not at the Hogan site, building new at Spence or something.
I think regardless, right?
if we're building new
regardless,
wherever, where are
yeah.
we going to put administration? And I would assume
The cost of
possibly in
that.
the new building to create capacity for them there. That
Okay.
would make some sense.
Okay.
We've also received comments at some of the linkages about the connection between district level staff and the school level staff, and that would facilitate relationships.
Absolutely.
Again, I think some services that Hogan offers probably needs to stay in this area versus going to a Northwoods or going to, I'm talking about register, enrollment things and things like that need to be more admirable there.
In a centralized location.
Right. For people to access.
All right, it's 8 o'clock. So we're going to move into public speaking. Scott and Jeff, if you have any other specific information you want, just email Aaron or me or both. If you want to run other scenarios during the board meeting at our next meeting that aren't included here, that haven't been discussed tonight, send those ideas, and then Aaron will run the numbers on all that. And if there's any additional information, like if you are unhappy about the granularity of enrollment trends and you want more on that, let us know. If you want more on budget projection stuff, Jeff has already asked for more clarity on that. That's more information. If you need that, ask. Okay, so my screen is still trying to load. So moving on to public speakers, we have 2 public speakers registered tonight. It's the policy of the board to provide at its public meetings an opportunity for individuals to address the board. Comments about individual staff or personnel will not be allowed. Open meeting law prohibits the board from engaging in discussion or responding to matters not included on the agenda. All speakers are reminded that the same policy limits your time to speak to 5 minutes. This limit will be strictly enforced. May I ask the superintendent to keep track of the time and to notify the speaker when time is running out?
I will do so.
You are also asked to give your name and the school district where you reside at the beginning of your time for the public record. Our first speaker tonight is Laura Eber.
My name is Laura Eber, and I reside in the School District of La Crosse. Dear board members, Superintendent Engel, Associate Superintendent Harsey, and all who are present. I would like to start out by thanking each and every one of you for being here and doing your due diligence, making difficult decisions that are in the best interest of the school district, the students, families, and community. I'm here today as a concerned community member and a parent of 3 children. 2 who currently are in the school district and schools, and 1 a freshman in college. As a community member and parent, I am concerned about the negative perceptions and lack of information that are shared with the community about the wonderful opportunities that the school district of La Crosse has to offer students and families. I'm going to ask you to please close your eyes. Picture in your head what an average community member hears or knows about our school district. They hear closing down schools, teacher staff attrition, decreased funding, decreasing student enrollment, and drugs. The average community member doesn't watch the district board meetings, nor do they necessarily follow or like the School District of La Crosse on Facebook to see the posts. They are busy with whatever is going on in their lives and don't always search the school district's website, which isn't always up to date. What picture does this paint in your head? Go ahead and open your eyes. Thank you. Now I'd like to paint a picture of a different, what some of us do see for the School District of La Crosse, to parents, families, and the community. I ask you consider more reasons for parents, families, and community members to invest in the school district. Investing isn't just monetary, in fact. It is inclusive in interest, time, and talents, along with networking and promoting to others. Please invest time and resources to promote our school district, to be the district that everybody wants their children to attend. We have the La Crosse Promise Center, as we heard about from Callie Arntz, and her opportunities with Habitat for Humanity, and that's in both Logan High School and Central High School. Many parents aren't even aware of this. You can boast about some of the following along with more inclusive lists that each of you have received from me. Students taking foreign languages have had the opportunity over the summer to go to Spain and to Germany. They lived there to take in the culture for 2 weeks or more. And then in Germany, those students who had lived with families, somebody from their family came and lived with families here and got to see our school district. Music concerts at all levels. Some community members may just want to attend those. They like to attend sporting events. Art exhibits where students' art is being shown, say the public library or the pump house. What about the middle school and high school plays that are in collaboration with the La Crosse Community Theater? Just a few things. I would love to see the School District of La Crosse show their pride in how they exceed in state requirements in health classes. This was what I had watched from a board workshop on December 4th. They go above and beyond some requirements. The school district is a district that we want students to stay instead of open enrolling to other districts, and for other students to come and enroll in our school district. Make the community aware of the opportunities that La Crosse is the district to be in. When people know positive things, they're more willing to invest in it, right? And believe in the organization? I know I do as a parent from the teachers and coaches and supervisors that my students have worked with. Not every student is going to be successful and love core classes. That's an issue throughout the whole United States. But please keep in mind that some of the other electives that are offered have assisted more students in motivating them to do better in their core classes because there are correlations between the two, such as music and math or science.
30 seconds remaining.
So many times the opportunities, again, motivate these students to do better. Comparing the school district of La Crosse, let's not do that to all the other schools. Let's stand proud in who we are and show what we are and the positive aspect and experiences we offer our students. Please consider the value of the community. We are the school district of La Crosse, and I plan to return to share ideas of possibly promoting the school district in other ways. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker tonight is Linda Heelman.
I am here tonight to discuss my opposition to closing Northwoods International School. And bear with me, my voice is not real good. I had COVID a month ago. Good evening, I am Linda Smith-Heileman. My granddaughter Nova is in 2nd grade at Northwoods International. I am a lifelong resident of the North Side. I grew up and was educated on the North Side, worked my entire career on the North Side, and raised my daughters here. I have served on a number of PTOs and committees for North Side schools. I do have a number of concerns regarding the closure of Northwoods. The IB program is a very successful program. And I am worried about the risk and the future of that program if it should be moved. Will they still have that core value that they have there now? Let me see. I understand, I did a lot of homework within the last month, that Northwoods International is only one of 30 schools in the state of Wisconsin to have this program. I know that there is an inquiry model. It has 12 different components to that program. And when I spoke with the principal at Northwoods, he said that every month they, what is the word I want to use? They focus on each one of those components every month, whether it be worldwide communication. They take those skills out and work in the public with them. My granddaughter is a testament to that. One night she came home and told my husband and I, she goes, "Do you know that there is a country, Chad?" I didn't know that in 2nd grade. I probably didn't know that 30 years ago. And she said it only cost $1.65 a month for them to buy their meals. She's a little sponge. She soaks up all of that. Also, Nova has been in Spanish since 4K. She can come home and she can communicate in Spanish to us. I took French, so I don't understand a lot of that, but it is so interesting to hear her speak. So I'm wondering what will happen if that is moved to a different school. Will that Spanish program still be in existence? And I think today in our world, Spanish is a very important language for our kids to retain. And like she had said previously, the kids do travel a lot nowadays. So the average classroom size at Northwoods, I believe it's still under the SAGE program. It might be called something else now, I don't remember. But it is 15 children and under in that program. Will that continue? Or by closing Northwoods, will that, obviously that will make the classroom size grow. And I think it is very, very important to keep the classrooms smaller. Let me see here. A lot of the points that were addressed tonight on the overheads, I do have in my outline, and I'm hoping in your free time you can take and read what I have passed out to you. As far as busing goes, a few of the students are bused out to Northwoods International, but if we close that, those children are going to have to be bused to another school, so that is not helping the cost of busing. To me, that's almost increasing it. We do pick our granddaughter up at school a lot and take her. I do not see that many buses at Northwoods. A lot of the parents do drop their children off and pick them up. So Northwoods is the second newest school in the La Crosse School District, along with Southern Bluffs. It was built in 1992. So to me, there would not be a lot of maintenance that would have to be done to that program. I will hurry, because I could talk forever. Dr. Harsey knows that. There is 10 plus acres of land at Northwoods. Is that not a place that expansion could be done? Nova took me there on Christmas break. She took me to walk on the grounds. I was simply amazed at how much land there is. She was so excited to show me the walking path. She took me down to the creek. What good educational opportunities there are there.
Time's up. Thank you.
Am I done? Okay. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Do you need to? I don't want to. Sorry. Okay, we're moving on to the superintendent's consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, so the consent agenda is a mechanism used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. With a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Jimenez, we will approve these unless there are items that board members want to remove. Hearing none, we'll move on to the board consent agenda. Oh, yep, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll roll call vote on the consent agendas. So the first one, the superintendent's consent agenda.
Ms. Bergdahl? Aye. Dr. Garcia? Aye. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right, so moving on to the board consent agenda. So again, the consent agenda is a mechanism used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented.
Second.
With a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Ms. Berkedahl, we will approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented unless there are items, board members, and we'll do the roll call too. Are there items that board members want to remove before we do that vote? None.
Ms.
Thank you.
Berkedahl? Aye. Dr. Garcia? Aye. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. Okay, so we're moving into the matters reserved for board action. The first item on the agenda is the, whoops, I just clicked away. 2022-23 financial audit report. We have both embedded documents and a nice handy printed book here. And I will turn it over to.
Yeah, we have our auditor here who's joining us virtually. As we're getting them set up, would you mind if we had our safety manager, Ann Endress, introduce herself real quick? She was instrumental in one of those consent agenda items, and if there was a moment for her to just briefly introduce herself, that would be great while we coordinate the auditor.
Sure. Hello. Welcome.
Here and to lend my support any way I can.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I will turn it over to Ms. Sprang as the financial audit report is her domain.
Okay, do we have Mr. Troutman on?
We do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
So Mr. Troutman will go through our financials. We have given you a hard copy to follow along a little bit easier than following along online. Mr. Troutman represents Clifton Larson Allen, who have been our auditors for the last 7 years. Okay.
Very good. Well, appreciate that introduction. Everyone can hear me okay? I will proceed. I will be calling out as I'm going through kind of a 10, 15-minute overview of the financial statements, just the page numbers, so if you're following along either in the packet or in the paper copy you have in front of you, you can follow along the page numbers. But with that, I'd always like to start at the independent auditor's report, which is really the conclusion of the 2022-2023 audit as of June 30th, 2023. Again, that letter starts, that opinion auditor's report letter starts with the opinion section, which is the fact that we have audited the accompanying financial statements of the governmental activities, each major fund, the aggregate remaining fund information of the school district of La Crosse. Really all of that information, including the footnotes to those financial statements, are considered the basic financial statements. So that is what we're issuing opinion on. So our opinion in that is an unmodified opinion. That is a clean opinion, which again, your internal controls of the district and your entity, which operate, really 365 days a year, which really allow all that financial data to flow into a financial statement at your end, is operating effectively. And that's exactly what you strive to achieve in an external audit. So that's a very good news there. The rest of that opinion letter, independent auditor's report, really goes through basis for opinions. It kind of explains a little bit about what that means and what standards we follow in that opinion. Goes through responsibilities of management of the district itself and how that management plays an important role and makes up the internal control of the district. And then it goes through the auditor's responsibility and explains a little bit more in depth as far as the various standards that we follow in that opinion. With that, I want to go kind of jump right to the financial statements, and that is the basic financial statements start after the management discussion and analysis section. I will point out, which I do each year, that MD&A, management discussion and analysis section, is really written by the district. It's kind of a plain English highlights as far as what happened during the year. So again, a lot of information that you might find just in 3-4 pages as far as highlights of the year. Very good read as far as users of the financial statements as well. But I want to jump to the basic financial statements because that's really what we issue an opinion on. So if on page 16 is the balance sheet. So again, this is as of a point in time, June 30th, 2023. I won't read all the assets and liabilities to you, but I want to focus and narrow in on the bottom of the page, which is the fund balance. Your general fund balance ended the year at $34,874,000 as of June 30th, 2023. You can see there is really 5 main categories of that fund balance. From top to bottom, that is a hierarchy, so most restrictive on the top to least restrictive on the bottom. You have a very small amount, $4,260, which ties to your inventories and prepaid items, which effectively means that's non-spendable. You have a restricted amount, $991,000. Those are monies that are essentially restricted outside of the district's control. Then below that line, you have committed, assigned. Those two are earmarked funds, various levels. Committed is a little bit higher level commitment. You have to formally commit those funds. $7,350,000. Then you have assigned, which is also earmarked funds for various purposes, $1,484,000. All of that kind of boils down to what's left, which is the unassigned fund balance, $25,044,000. That represents really the carryover or the reserve that you ended this summer with and carried into the current school year you're in right now, current fiscal year you are in right now. And a lot of times what you want to look at in that number as far as being kind of gauging whether, how much is it enough, is it healthy, and so forth, a healthy fund balance, is you take that number and compare it into your expenditures. And the reason why the school district industry and the public sector industry looks at that and does it that way is really to benchmark in relative size to your district. So $25 million to a small district out there would be an extreme amount, and 25 million to a much larger entity may be not quite enough. So what we do is we take that into account, into a percentage into your expenditures. And that represents about 25% of expenditures. Again, 20 to 25, that range is really the benchmark, the minimum fund balance you want to have in unassigned fund balance. So you're right at that level. You're right at that really good level as far as having an adequate fund balance carried over. Districts and entities that don't have that fund as a fund balance really have to short-term borrow or have to at least consider short-term borrowing throughout the year. Again, not able to have that reserve and that carryover to fall back on. So again, certain cash flow challenges in school district financial fiscal world really make that challenge, right? As you know, and grants and property taxes and things like that come in well after your year-end starts. So it's extremely important for school districts in particular to have that 20 to 25%. So excellent there. That also helps with any bond ratings having that adequate fund balance. So that's good there. The next page 18, 2 pages, is really the expenditure, the statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, the income statement essentially. So you can see that general fund column, the leftmost column, really starts with revenues, expenditures, and all the functions of your school district. And then it comes down to the total net change in fund balance. So now you can see where the fund balance started at the beginning of the audited fiscal year here at the beginning of July 1st, 2022, and then where it ended, what the number we just talked about. So you can see your fund balance went up in the current fiscal year, 22-23 fiscal year, just a little short of $2.8 million. So again, you added to that fund balance, ending the fund balance of $34,874,000. That's kind of where you ended in the balance sheet, how you got there in the income statement. Any questions on that financial information? Again, the rest of the book goes through the rest of the basic financial statements, goes through all the footnotes that kind of tie into some of the major numbers here and detail that out into quite a bit of detail. Quite a bit of the book is probably over half the book is really the footnotes to these financial statements. Then in the back of the book, after the footnotes, is really all of your non-major funds. So all the other funds that are in the district get kind of detailed out there and shows the balance sheet and the income statement of all those funds. So again, I'll open up to any questions on the financial information. Otherwise, I will go back to the end of the book where it talks a little bit more about our other audit reports that we issue.
Questions from the board?
I do have one, Mr. Troutman, and you might be dealing with it as you move on, so feel free to just deal with it if it's coming up later. In the governance communication, there is a section entitled Other Audit Findings or Issues.
Yes.
And in that, it says the following describes findings or issues arising that are, in our professional judgment, significant and relevant to your oversight of the financial reporting process. And there's 2 bullet points: the preparation of the annual financial report and the special education transportation. So if you could talk about that part of the governance letter and as you move through your presentation, just so I can better understand what is meant by that language.
Yes, that's an excellent segue. That's exactly what I was going to talk about next.
Perfect.
So if there's no further questions, I'll just move on to that.
Before we segue, are there other questions from board members? Not hearing any, so please move on, I guess.
Okay, thank you. On page 84, that section, if you're following along, it's towards the back of the book, is really the additional independent auditors reports for the basic financial statements. There's 2 of them. The first one starts on page 85. That is the independent auditors report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards, GAS, otherwise known as the Yellow Book standards. The audit really has to follow a number of different standards. This is one of them, and it really is geared towards your internal control. So I talked about that internal control at the front end. Well, as we're looking at that internal control and taking a look at all of your systems and all of your processes and your controls themselves and identify the key controls, we have to basically issue a report on that. And we also have to issue any recommendations and findings that we have. Now, the finding for this is 2023-001, and that is located, I'm going to jump around a little bit, so I apologize. That is located in detail on page 97. So that really explains that. If you were looking at last year's or would pull up last year's or even the year before, you'll see this is a repeat finding. It's a continuous finding. Not uncommon for districts to have this. What this is relating to is the preparation of the annual financial report, the book that you have. Really everything in there, all the footnotes, all the basic financial statements that we went through and all the other pages that we didn't go through are really designed by the federal auditing standards to be prepared by the entity, by themselves, in their entirety. So the way that would work is we would come in and do an audit and you would present, management of the district would present those financial statements to us and we would audit them. That's the way the standards are designed for the internal control process. I can tell you in Wisconsin that is extremely rare for school districts to do that. There's a couple reasons why that is. Number one is cost. Just the complication of this document with all the standards that continuously change. You just went through two very big standards last year and this year's audit. There's more coming. Again, it takes a major amount of time to do that. Most districts in Wisconsin hire their auditor to do that. When you do that, it's outside of your control and it is considered a deficiency. So again, that I don't want to make light of that. It is a finding. It is a significant deficiency, so it is not a highest level finding, which would be a material weakness. It is a lower level finding. However, it is still a finding. It still needs to be discussed. The takeaways of that and kind of what you need to know about that or mitigating controls that you need to know is really the board's responsibility over the internal control of this document especially, is what we're talking about in this finding, really becomes important. It becomes important that management is reviewing this document. And I can tell you that at the end of the audit process, where we draft these financial statements based on your numbers and your accounting systems, we really have a very robust review process. And that is very much intentional, geared towards this finding, because again, we want to give the district an opportunity to mitigate this, which is you review every page of that document, you have a list of questions, we go back and forth, and then you also prepare the MD&A, that 4 or 5 page section in the beginning, and that ties everything together to make sure all the numbers agree to what you have. So again, that's nothing new. That is exactly the same as years past, and unless some significant changes were to be made, will be really continuous. So I'll stop there if there's any questions on that. Again, that is a repeat finding from 2022-001.
Of districts our size that you work with, how many are able to meet this standard without a finding? Have the capacity to do that?
I don't know of any. We work with a lot of top 10 sized districts in Wisconsin, and I don't know of any. Simply, there's a reason for that, and it's not just because they just don't want to do it. It's because you have an annual reporting process to DPI in Wisconsin. Other states, it's not quite the same, so you may find a little bit more districts doing their own, entities doing their own, but because you already have to report pretty robust reporting to DPI separate from this, there's really more of a focus on that and lesser of a focus of putting time, energy, people, additional people, whatever it would take to do that, to have enough time to do that, into the actual preparation of that. Non-school districts, we do see a little bit more of that because that oversight from the state is not there for municipalities as it is for school districts. So hopefully that answered your question. There's very few districts in Wisconsin, all sizes, that prepare their own. I personally audit about 20 school districts and I don't have a single one.
And I appreciate the detail because when you read the governance letter and you see that there's findings, there's always a question about, well, that must mean there's something really bad happening. And so it's good to have that conversation and that description from you, especially given how many districts you work with. So I appreciate the detail.
You're welcome. Yes, the wording on here tends to be kind of given to us by the standards, and you're correct. Findings are a lot of times misinterpreted as, negatives, really bad things, when in fact, we're doing an audit, we're looking at everything. When we see stuff and that even elevates to a finding, it is an opportunity, to at least learn about it. You're probably not going to go out and change this one anytime soon, but it's good to know about it. It's good to understand what goes into preparing the financial statements. And we've come a long way in the last 20 years in that, because 20 years ago, the standards were written differently, where, there wasn't this requirement, I guess, to have districts understand the financial statements like they do now and have that robust review. So it's really a good thing. And findings, in my opinion, are not bad things. They could be things that you need to correct, but they're not bad. They're not negatives. They're simply, getting value out of the audit to improve. So,
Ms. Spring, in the years that we've done the audit, has this been a finding every time? Like, how many years have we done this and this has been a finding?
This has been a finding every year.
So for decades?
Going back to the beginning of time, because we just don't have an auditor capability or an accountant CPA capability to put these financials together. However, they do send them to me, and I read every page to make sure they agree. And I come across some mistakes, and when I do, I address those with the auditor, and they check, and it could have been just a simple typo.
Okay.
But yeah, we review them very thoroughly.
Thank you.
So with that, I will continue. Page 88, so we're going back to page 88 now, is the second letter, the second independent auditor's report, and final independent auditor's report on compliance for each major federal and state program on internal control over compliance required by the uniform guidance and the state single audit guidelines. So we have the yellow book, the governmental auditing standards. We just went through that, which relates really to internal control. Now we're talking about your major federal and state grant programs. So again, this is an additional layer of the audit that goes through and takes a look at all of those, and also the internal controls behind those as required by the state single audit guidelines and uniform grant guidance. A lot of those rules are set forth by your grantors themselves, so they tell us kind of what to look at. For each year is different, because each year you have different federal programs. So with that, one additional finding did come out, and that is 2023-002. So we will go back to the page 98 for that, which again, these are our section 3 federal and state award findings and question costs. This particular finding did not have any question costs, so there was no issues there as far as anything claimed wrong or anything like that. This was simply an internal control over those grants other matter. And it's really related to a very specific issue with special education transportation. And again, there was simply the first draft when we came in to do the audit. The first draft of the claim included some numbers, some students that were basically received special education transportation services and were on the general pupil transportation claim. So again, simple mistake. That was corrected immediately and no question costs. Everything was fine. But again, we kind of zeroed into that internal control and said, you need to improve that control to start to help better catch some of those errors. So again, no fiscal issue. That's kind of what an audit is for, is to double check all that stuff. But when we do find that, we do have to report that to you. And again, a significant deficiency is lesser in severity than a material weakness. Material weakness on a compliance issue would mean there was something, considerably and materially wrong. This is lesser than that. So again, just simply improving your internal controls over those grants. I can tell you that with the various federal grants in the last few years that all districts have had to really deal with, and they're new, they're brand new. We've seen a huge uptick in federal findings. I can tell you that this one is very minor compared to what we're seeing with some of the ESSER funds and things like that out there. There's some very large mistakes being made and some internal control issues. Your district didn't have any of that. This was simply just a claim issue which got corrected. So just want to make sure there's clarity behind that. However, we are still required to show that and report that to you. So that's what that's related to. And that has already been corrected. Part of that process when you have a Section 3 finding is no matter what severity is, you really have a corrective action plan, and that is kind of shoring up your internal control over that. So that's a really positive thing to be improving that. Because again, internal controls, whether we're talking about grants or whether we're talking about general controls, is really an evolving thing. You have to continuously evolve because as staff changes, as positions change, things change and procedures change, and you have to always be coming back to that and make sure that you're considering all the factors. So, any questions on that?
I do have a question, but it'd be more for Dr. Engel. I think more, maybe Ms. Spring. But the cause that was listed in this issue is that there was experience turnover. So, I mean, we recognize that when turnover happens, things might get missed, and that's fine. Have we as a district internally looked at what are our plan Bs when we have significant turnover? Is there somebody else on staff? So what have we done internally in terms of staffing issues and concerns in order to address this for the future?
One of our strategies is duplication or overlap of abilities or duties. That can be difficult given the specialized nature of some things, but trying to have replicability across the organization can help. Having standardized operating procedures written out for critical elements is also something that we've continually working on developing and expanding. And then lists of duties as folks transition so that we get clear ideas of what's needed. I don't know if Ms. Sprang has any further input on this particular one, but those are our general strategies for trying to mitigate the impact of losses.
Right, and we change our procedure. We just make it clearer. But yes, that is something that we always have to watch when we have a change of staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions, anything else that you want me to cover? That kind of ends my presentation or my planned presentation, but I'd be happy to talk about anything else, any other questions you have. Certainly appreciate the dialogue, I appreciate the questions. They're great questions, and really shows that you're very interested in your financial statements as a board, which is appreciated on my end, so I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
I have a few. I actually had 4 questions, and you answered 2 of them already. The date of the report, according to page 4, is November 29th. As I understand, by statute, we have to have this to DPI by December 15th.
Correct.
Today's the 8th of January, so I'm unclear. We're accepting the report, however, it's already been sent to DPI. Do other districts do this kind of timing like this? This seems backwards to me.
For the presentation, you mean?
Correct. And for the board to approve the acceptance of it?
Yes, that has to happen really after the fact, after it's issued from a logistics standpoint.
But prior to, does that ever happen in other districts prior to the December 15th due date requirement to DPI?
I have never seen that myself, no. No, the issuance usually is the process between the auditors and the management. If the board were to get involved there, I've never seen that. They certainly could. That could be something we could work into the timeline. We would have to have that board meeting then. I think drafts were, sometime in November, so we'd have to have it in late November. Middle of November would be the time frame of that meeting to do that ahead of time. We can certainly make that happen if that's something that the board wishes to do. That's not something that would be completely unusual. It's just, or completely unheard of, but I've never seen that in today's practice just because of the timing of some of the information that flows into your financial statements is from the state of Wisconsin, and we have to wait for that audit. And that audit is not available usually until November 1st. So there's a very short timeline to get these out.
Just want to make sure that we as a board are in compliance with statute. That was my main question.
Yep.
That's all I have.
Okay. Good question.
Any others tonight? So just so board members know, we will be going beyond 9 to do our regular board meeting. So don't feel constrained by the clock. If there are more questions about this before we move into vote, we have time. Jeff and Scott, do you have any questions online there?
I'm good.
I'm fine, thank you.
All right.
I'll make a motion to accept the 2022-23 financial audit report as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Jimenez, and we'll do a roll call vote on this one.
Ms. Berkedal? Aye. Dr. Garcia? Aye. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right. We'll move into the Wisconsin Association of School Boards 2024 proposed resolutions.
And I'll make a motion to give WASB Delegate Deb Sukla or their designee the authority to use their discretion when voting on behalf of the School District of La Crosse at the WASB Delegate Assembly.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Ms. Berkedal. I will pause for discussion if it needs to occur before we do a roll call vote. Go ahead.
Just one quick note. I was going to save it for my updates from CISA. CISA is on board.
Cool. That's good to know.
Thank you.
Any other comments on any of those amendments to language? Some of it is just updating language to more modern. Okay, so we'll move into a roll call vote on that one.
Ms. Berkedal? Aye. Dr. Garcia? Aye. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right, and then I sent an email out about this over the weekend. So Ms. Sukla submitted a proposed amendment to OE4. Let's take a motion on this and then I'll open discussion.
I move to accept the, oh, hang on, I got to open it up now.
There's a recommended action.
Too many tabs open in my head and everywhere else. Thank you. I move to grant first reading approval for the Operation Expectations OE4 Personnel Administration to include the highlighted language.
Is there a second? All right. Thank you. So now we will pause for discussion. If you open the document, you can see the language that was included is to OE 4.5. It adds that is reasonably free from harm and harassment. I did a little digging through our policies just to see if there was any overlap. The only one that I could find was OE1, which is kind of the global operational expectation. I'll read it real quick. So the superintendent shall not cause, allow, or fail to take reasonable measures to prevent any practice, activity, decision, or organizational condition that is unlawful, unethical, unsafe, disrespectful, imprudent, in violation of board policy, or endangers the district's public image or credibility. And then I looked at our monitoring reports to see what the evidence was, and it didn't seem to overlap in the way that I believe Ms. Sukla's intent for this amendment was. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I did a quick comb through of the policies and the monitoring reports where I thought we may find some overlap, and I didn't necessarily find what I believe the evidence Ms. Sukla would be looking for would be. So now I'll open it up to discussion.
I guess I would ask about overlap in 4.6. Administer clear personnel rules and procedures for employees, including but not limited to procedures for a reduction in force, staff ethics, conflicts of interest, and expected conduct.
Can you say that again?
Look, if you look at 4.6, which is right underneath,
Oh, gotcha.
I guess the way I was understanding it, interpreting it, number 5 is really about the culture, the environment, and creating that. And number 6 is really about the rules and procedures, which is different than culture and environment. That's why I added the language there.
but I guess I would, and again, it's not that I have a problem with the language, but I'm just trying to figure out if there is overlap, if it's necessary, because doesn't the rules and the policies create the culture along with the people that we have?
That's the hope.
I think yes to maybe the primary extent, but I think there is a less maybe tangible way in which having the statement, in black and white contributes to the sense that this is a priority.
Sure, but then what are we measuring? How do we measure it?
Yeah.
And I would say that from a monitoring perspective with 6, with rules and procedures, we would probably be presenting policies and handbook items, whereas with 5, we would be presenting staff survey results or evidence of complaints regarding that. And so I would see them as differentiated, in terms of the outcome of what the board would see. And of course, you would want policies in place, but you would also want to know that they've had the intended effect. And so I could see survey results being useful in providing that evidence to the board.
And for the record, I don't feel that we're in any violation of this. I think this just reinforces really what we're hearing from staff in linkages, but also I think the board's priorities.
I like mitigating or taking action against harm and harassment. There is something strange about the wording that is reasonably free from harm and harassment.
Right.
But I know that's like policy talk. You can't eradicate it. That's an unrealistic expectation.
Correct.
But
In
there is something
today's-
like I'm going to step into a place that's reasonably free from harm and harassment.
I didn't love adding that language, but
Yeah.
I think for practical application, it needs to be there.
I agree.
Absolutely,
I
sir.
agree. I just, I read that and I was like, ooh. But yeah.
So the motion on the table is to accept this as a first reading. If board members wanted to change up the language, we could do a motion to amend. Otherwise, I'll go right now into a roll call vote on this first reading, and if it doesn't pass, then another motion can be considered. If there are any last comments on this one. All right. I believe we had a motion from Mr. Korberg.
Nope.
Or no,
Ms.
from
Sukla.
Ms. Sukla, and the second was
Ms. Burkell.
Dr. Sprague.
Both
Okay.
did. You can have it.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote.
Second from Ms. Birkedall then? Or Dr. Sprague?
Ms. Berger.
Okay. Sounds good, thank you. All right, Ms. Birkedall? Aye. Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right. So that first reading was approved. Our policy requires that we do a second reading before it becomes board policy. We'll see that at our next meeting. So our information item tonight, before I go into that, I can pause. We could take a quick break for 5 minutes and then entertain a motion to extend beyond 9.
Can we do that?
Sounds like we need that. Okay.
Could use a drink of water.
So, Laura, do we have to do anything about like pausing the meeting and taking a break? Like just
I
recording
move,
it?
I move to have a recess for 5
Move
minutes.
to have a recess.
Second.
Okay.
Don't we need a motion to extend beyond 9, or is that what you're saying?
That's-
We
yeah,
will,
that's gonna
yes.
come
We'll-
next.
When we
Yeah.
come back from our little break,
Before 9.
we'll do that before. Yeah.
Okay.
So everybody be back by 8:56.
Okay.
Do we need to roll call this one?
Yes, please.
Okay, so roll call vote on extending the meeting past 9.
Yes. I'm sorry, who had the motion and
Me.
second?
Motion by Dr. Jimenez and a second by Dr. Sprague.
Dr. Sprague, thank you. Ms. Berkedal? Aye. Dr. Garcia? Aye. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
I'll say aye, but I'm really tempted to say no, just for the fun.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. Yeah, I also want to say no too. Yeah. Okay, so our information item tonight is Results Monitoring Report R3.1, the Involved Citizenship Monitoring Report. And just a reminder, we're not voting on this one tonight. We're going to take a look at this. R3 is a long one, so we see this one over many months. So we'll take a look at this, discuss the evidence, and then we'll be reminded of R3.1 as we work through the rest of R3. So I'll turn it over.
I would like to welcome Ms. Carrie Huth to the podium today. She is our Interim Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. Prior to this, she was our Supervisor of Educator Readiness, and last year served as our principal at Spence Elementary School. And so we're thankful for her expertise in curriculum, instruction, and assessment in her current role, and she's here to present on this results policy. So thank you.
All right. Results 3.1 states that students will understand and exercise the rights and responsibilities of citizenship in our democratic society. We have 2 indicators as measured for reasonable progress related to 3.1. The first indicator is Wisconsin Forward Civic Responsibility. It states the percentage of students in grades 4, 8, and 10 that score a 3 or 4 on the Wisconsin Forward Social Studies category of civic responsibility will demonstrate reasonable achievement or growth. And this is measured by the Wisconsin Forward exam. The indicator 2 is student voter registration. The percentage of eligible high school students that have registered to vote will favorably reflect overall voting trends as measured by the county voter registration. Both indicators are marked as making reasonable progress. To further review the data, I ask that you go into the overview pages. For indicator 1, we will review the table of data from our 4, 8, and 10, grades 4, 8, and 10 Wisconsin Forward Social Studies exam, specifically that civic responsibility. We are able to compare our historical data with the exception of 2020 because of the exam did not take place because of the pandemic. You will notice in grade 4, it indicates that 62.8% of our lacrosse students in 2023 are proficient and advanced learners. The state average is 61.3. We did have growth in this area from 2022 to 2023. The table breaks down the data into specific subgroups for our student growth. As you review it, you will notice the areas of strengths and other areas of challenges as we continue to try to close those gaps for our subgroups. I'd also like to make it known that in the last couple of years, we've had recent social studies standards. Our curriculum resources are now aligned to those standards, and our teachers are implementing the new standards with new resources at their grade levels. Our grade 8 data indicates that we have 58.4% of our students proficient or advanced at the 8th grade level. That is slightly below our state average of 59.2%. I look at that data and know that that is an area that we need to continue to reflect on, but also when looking back at 2022, you will notice that we were almost 10% below the state. And so we are just at this point 0.8 below the state in our 2023 year data. So we're making gains, and that grade 8 is the only grade that was measured that we are just slightly below the state. As we look at grade 10, our data indicates that we have 52.2% of our students that are proficient and advanced. The state average for 2023 is 47.9%, so we are a good amount, a positive percentage of growth even over last year where we were above the state. So we're making gains there as well. And overall, our grades 4, 8, and 10 data is above the state average. So when we compile the data from the 3 grade levels, you will notice that for 2023, we are at 57.7%, where our state is 56.1%. We are looking to continue that growth over the state average and also looking at making sure that we reflect on the subgroups and that we're assessing and monitoring all of our data beyond the Wisconsin Forward to continue to make growth in this area.
I just want to comment the growth, although we are still have some room to improve on grade 8. The amount of growth since 2021 to now is remarkable.
Yes.
It's very clear. Your efforts are very well noted, and it's like when you get a bad grade and you try to make it up, it's a lot harder. And so that just kudos to all the staff that were responsible for making that happen. That's hard work. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. Any other questions about indicator 1?
I would kind of piggybacking on what Ms. Sukla said, and I think we all can see this for ourselves, but just to kind of contextualize some of the statistics, the numerical change in grade 8 was, of those scoring at the proficiency level, was a significant number of at least 31, 32 students, I think, whereas even though we saw that as the category with percentage decrease compared to the state average, at 4th grade, the same number of students scoring over a slightly less, bigger pie, right?
Yeah.
Resulted in our positive percentage there. So like overall, though, I agree with Ms. Sukla's statement. I wanted to ask you, so you mentioned right at the outset that implementing new curriculum materials is undergoing now. So we will expect to see the fruits of that a year from now, right?
Correct.
Hopefully.
Multiple years. We know that, The change takes 3 to 5 years, so we're probably in about the second to, year. So looking at the next few years, we will notice continued
Good.
changes.
Very positive looking trends.
That's the most exciting part.
It is exciting.
Moving on to indicator 2, which is our student voter registration, which again, as a reminder, is the percentage of eligible high school students that have registered to vote will favorably reflect overall voting trends as measured by the county voter registration. As noted in previous years, this data is collected in April with the spring election election data. So we're using the number of seniors that are 18 by that early April date. So as we look at the 3 years of data, we again show growth over those last 3 years. So this year, 2023, we have 39.7% of our 18-year-olds that were registered to vote. Last year, in 2022, we had 24%, so a significant increase there. And as we reflect on our local data, it was likely impacted by local races on that ballot, as well as additional questions that were asked during that time frame. I also would like to just point out the subgroups down below and the amount of growth that was made in those subgroups over the last 3 years to close the gaps for many of the subgroup populations. It's definitely a positive trend that we want to continue in the future.
Do you think that is reflective of LIT's work in the district at all?
Can you repeat that?
Do you think that's reflective of LIT's work in the district, Leaders Igniting Transformation?
For maybe somebody else could add to that, but I know for myself, just learning and just being in this role for a very short amount of time, I'm not real sure. But there could be several different reasons why.
I think LIT could have had an impact, certainly. I also know that there was a voter registration campaign that involved some local heroes that play basketball, and that might have had an impact as well. Johnny and Jordan Davis, so that might have had an impact also. And politics, with referenda on the ballot, operational referenda, that might have driven interest as well with the 23 April referenda. There might have been an increased interest in being able to vote for that. So that may have had an impact. Kind of interesting looking at that trend over time. There were bigger things in 22 that maybe would have piqued a student's interest, but it was earlier in the school year, so fewer students would have been 18 and eligible to vote for that. And the 21 numbers would have also been reflective of a 2020 general election on the national stage, but once again, a November election wouldn't have maybe generated as much voter registration given the age of the students at that time. So a hot topic April referendum would probably drive higher voter registration. This is one that we may see some fluctuation in over the years, given the topics that are on there. Continued increases are maybe a little unlikely to a certain point. And this isn't an area where we can kind of track cohorts from 16, 17, 18 either. We're not going to be able to see rises in that over time. So this will be an interesting one to follow. I would love to maintain 40, 50, 60, 100% voter registration of eligible 18-year-olds. So.
I have a question to that end, actually. So this indicator reads to me as sort of like just a passive indicator, like we just measure it. Are we doing anything active within our curriculum, or what are we doing actively to encourage voter registration?
Well, I would say it's a reflection of high school courses in regards to that civic responsibility. And then just the campaign could have easily helped with that, but definitely within the curriculum, there would be obvious measures to empower our students to register to vote.
We work with a number of local nonprofits to encourage voter registration and awareness of political issues, and they integrate into curricular areas, but also provide opportunities for generalized information for students.
Any other indicator 2 questions? Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much and welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay, moving into announcements, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Sprague.
From CISA Board of Control, kind of made one announcement that our CISA 4 unanimously approved the WASB statements. That was one thing. And the item had come up last time that we had tabled a motion on the rate increases, proposed rate increases for both the flat fee and the daily rate. That was approved with only one dissension among the members of the Board of Control. I had a previous conversation with Dr. Engel and had sent President Baumann information about what the proposal was and asking to get from our district's perspective what kind of impact would a 5% increase have. Should also note that that increase of 5% to the daily rate does not actually impact the base contract rate. It is for additional services kind of over and above what we would be, and that's not an area where our district actually uses much at all. So it'd be very minimal from our district's perspective, but a number of our smaller rural districts around us, it made a significant impact. So we had a good discussion around whether and how it would affect them. So.
All right,
That's
thank
it.
you. Ms. Berkedal?
Grant Awards luncheon is February 9th, so make sure it's on your calendar. It's always good.
All right. So I believe this is Dr. Harsey's last meeting with the board. Is that correct? It is correct. Thank you for staying. Thank you for staying late on this wintry night. But also thank you for your years of service to the district. We will miss your passion for education and the compassion you show as you speak to every member of this community, young and old. So thank you for your time. And we wish you luck in your future endeavors.
Oh, thank you very much.
I wish there were more people here.
Honestly, I'm more excited that Ms. Huth just gave her first report as interim director. I'm so proud. That was very pleased. Yeah, that was great.
One of Dr. Harsey's greatest qualities and abilities is his ability to mentor and groom leaders in our school district. He does our new principal orientation, which happens throughout the school year, and has done a phenomenal job grooming the next generation of leaders in La Crosse. And while his departure makes me incredibly sad, I know that there's great folks like Ms. Huth coming up behind him to do continual work for the benefit of kids, and it's because of Dr. Harsey's works.
Thank you, Dr. Harsey. We wish you'd reconsider.
There's still time.
All right. We'll move on to announcements by Dr. Engel.
January 15th is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, an opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of his work and our ongoing efforts for racial equity and justice in our school district. Additionally, I will be up at 3:30 this morning and driving roads to ensure that they are safe for school tomorrow, despite the snow that's coming. It looks like 1.3 inches at 6 a.m. We should be having school. However, we'll have another 5 to 7 inches showing up with some blowing starting at noon, so stay tuned.
Is that the traditional process for deciding whether you go drive the roads and,
Does
this
in-
is shaky?
In his Honda Civic.
Yes, I drive up Bliss and then out on F, up 33, down YY, Ober, Chipmunk, MM, and then find a quick trip for some coffee along the way, making sure to pull over and safely text all of our friends in other neighboring school districts, as well as our transportation manager, and help make decisions. I figure if me and my Civic can get up and down the bluffs, it's safe for others. It's an area where I feel passionate about leading from the front.
I'm sure if you're interested in a ride-along, Trevor, he'd pick you up at
I'll be out.
3:30.
Kids are like, I hope he goes in the ditch. I hope he goes in the ditch.
I've had 4 emails from students already today requesting a day off.
How many? 40?
4.
I saw somebody in the audience had one, too.
We've had some passionate advocacy, passive advocacy from teachers in the audience.
T-shirts.
And so I suspect we will have school tomorrow, but we won't know until we check the roads and make sure it's safe. That's all I have to do.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll move into agenda planning for our next meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 22nd, 2024 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Jimenez, and we'll do a roll call vote on this.
Ms. Berkedal? Aye. Dr. Garcia? Aye. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Hi.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right, so we'll move it into our board debriefing, and Dr. Jimenez is up for
We
the
can
debrief
either
today.
dispense in order to move on with the rest of our work, or we can go into debriefing. It's your choice, President Baumann.
If there are comments that anyone wants to share, how about I do that? About how the meeting went, now's the time, and then we'll move on to our closed session.
My only comment is the 8 p.m. cutoff for our, I don't know how, was that so people who were giving public comment knew what time they were gonna speak?
Yeah, since we bumped that forward, and we can always do it different next time.
You know.
Well, and I
But,
think the agenda, as we look at our agenda planning, there's not a lot on the agenda compared to tonight.
Right.
So that we could still break at 8 in order for our public speakers and then come back to that
Right.
agenda
Yes.
item afterwards as
Yeah.
well. So I think there'll be a little more flexibility given what I see on the board agenda for next time than there was this time.
And my understanding is that in that strategic planning part, there will be less of a document dump.
Correct.
yep, we've gone
We'll be
through
working
all
on
of
all
it. I assume that Dr. Engel will come with the requested information and the other scenarios. We may run through that briefly, and then we'll get into discussing what we have.
I'll provide all of that in advance of the meeting, so board members have an opportunity to review before they come, and then clarify anything as opposed to present en masse.
Yeah, and I want to just say, like, the presentation is both for the board and for the community. So even though we received it on Thursday and it was posted to board docs, running through the information, even though I'm sure each one of us was digging through that all weekend, is often a first run through for people who are watching online, who are watching through the news, or who are in the audience. So I wanted to give time to that.
And I think to that end, we also need to be respectful that this is the board's work plan. This is what we agreed to do during these sessions, is my understanding, unless I'm wrong. And so I think no matter how passionate we may be about the topic, and I think we're all passionate, we need to stick to our work plan.
Yeah.
And at the last meeting, it was when we were doing agenda planning for this or planning around this, we agreed that the presentation be brief so there'd be more room for board discussion. As I recall, that was our I think once you start putting data together, it's always more than you think it's going to be, though.
It's such a complex problem, you know, it's so hard to compare one school to another. They are all unique and have different challenges and benefits. I think that crunching the variety of information gives us a bunch of different ways to look at the problem and hopefully come to a path that's best for the district.
Well, and I think our process needs to align with what we feel is the best solution, not what we've agreed upon as a work plan. So as we move along, if things aren't going against the speed we anticipated, I think we need to make sure that we adjust our tempo.
But it's still a work plan.
Yep. Yeah, the only
It's a-
thing
It can be changed.
the only thing I don't want to do
it's still agreed to it.
is
Right, yeah,
do
yeah.
a vote that the public is unaware of.
Yep.
Right.
So, and that's the thing where it's like, maybe we all know exactly what we want, and maybe we all are in agreement, which would be so great. But we still have to give time to this and notify the public with enough notice that, like, these are the things we considered and this is what we've come to,
Yeah.
so that they
I was
can,
not
ready.
trying to allude that I think we should go faster.
Oh, you're saying slow down, okay.
Perhaps, yeah.
Well, it could be either, right? We could move fast, we could move slow, it depends on where we go.
So would it help
Or-
if, as we go through the information session, the information pieces on this, if I did like a temperature test of like, how is the speed? How is the information incoming? How are you feeling?
I think we need to have an internal check on the tendency to drag things out. I agree with you that being able to go slow if we feel like this needs more time is important, but I think the tendency of working bodies like this can be to extend that almost indefinitely, and there's a sense to which we need to hold ourselves to making decisions and trying to do so with expediency.
I wonder if it would, I appreciate the high-level overview of everything, but it maybe would be helpful to provide more information to the board that's more in the weeds that would help us understand how these options came to be, how the numbers came to be, maybe include like a document of assumptions. Like all these calculations were based on the following assumptions. You know what I mean? Just to give us an idea of like, for example, an assumption would be that enrollment continues to decline, you know, like to some of the earlier points. I don't know, would that be helpful to other people?
Maybe I misunderstand you, because that is one of the assumptions that was stated there, but are you asking for, because there may be other things, I guess, on a per calculation basis as we look at, you know, the numbers in like the FAC report on the estimated annual savings, is that the kind of thing?
I think to like Mr. Jackson's point, like where do these numbers come from? $1.4 million, break that out, define it, what does it look like? And I think there's probably other elements of that too. A lot of this data is already gathered and readily available, and I think even during a meeting as the board's discussing and deliberating, if you have an information request, there's a good chance I should be able to find it or generate it, you know, within a few minutes. And so the board may continue their discussion while I gather that information and present it to the board as quickly as possible. Some of it may require a longer period of time, and we'll just have to figure that out as we go.
Just a quick point of order. I mean, this is board debriefing, not the discussion on the strategic plan. So I just want to be careful. I mean, if we want to talk about it, we can talk about it. We're going past 9 anyway, but just to remember the agenda topic.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable talking about it a little bit more. I just want to be sure that people are getting what they need, coming and feeling like it was an adequate amount of information and that they're feeling like the process is moving along. So like in the back of my head, I have all of the community input that we've received that was very like intense and full of anxiety. And then I also have the need to come up with a decision for next year so that we can begin next year's budget. That's why this is kind of chugging. And that's why we received an information dump and we'll be ready to have conversation, because we have these 2 big concerns that we need to address pretty quickly. I mean, 2 months, 4 meetings is not a lot, but we've all been like engaged through the FAC process, whether we attended in person or viewed online. This was not happening outside the board's knowledge. So now we will move into adjourn, and I have to do a closed session. Is there an omen? Oh, ominous, no. I think it's coming for sure.
Live view.
All right.
It's another passive
statement. The La Crosse Board of Education will consider a motion to move into closed session on Monday, January 8th, 2024, immediately following the Board of Education meeting, Hogan Administrative Center, room 209, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, the superintendent's evaluation. Is there a motion to adjourn to closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
Was that a second by you, Dr. Sprague?
Dr. Sprague,
Thank
yeah,
you.
sorry.
Ms. Berkebal? Aye. Dr. Garcia? Aye. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Dr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Mr. Newmeister?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla? Aye. Ms. Baumann?
Aye. So the meeting is adjourned. We'll meet upstairs in room 209. Jeff and Scott, do we have a...